media on economic issues and contributed a monthly column to the Indian business newspaper. His experience on financial sector reform in Latin America led to the appointment as special consultant to his governor of the Reserve Bank of India between 1992 and 94. His professional writings include contributions on the political economy of reform, financial sector and banking reform, and energy trends and policy. I would now like to invite Sri Berry for the inaugural address. Sir.
Dr. G.P. Samantha, Chief Statistician of India, and Secretary MOSPI, Sri Ashish Chaturvedi, Sri Arun Kumar, Sri Hasija, friends in the audience, colleagues from Niti Aayog, those who are participating offline. For reasons that I'll go into, it is a pleasure and an honor to be asked to deliver the keynote address today. First, as the announcer indicated, I have had myself the association with MOSPI through being a part-time member of the Statistical Commission about a decade ago. At the same time, Niti Aayog and MOSPI continue the old partnership between the Planning Commission and India Statistics. And those of you who keep up with these things would know that there is a recent book about the relationship between the Planning Commission, Pandit Nehru, Mahalanobis, and the whole leadership that India exercised in the area of sampling and national the creation of the NSS, which the book indicates was an inspiration to not only other developing countries but even developed countries. And I'm pleased that this is being hosted within the under the auspices of the Social Statistics Division of MOSPI. I say this because it's no surprise to me, it's a pleasant surprise to me that MOSPI has been so quick to understand and embrace environmental accounting. It's a part of the leadership that MOSPI, the NSS, the statistics establishment, because it's gone through various changes, has exercised since the 1950s. So let me also indicate, as was indicated, that I have an association with the RBI, which was the home for our chief statistician at the moment. Now, maybe finally I should also say that my NCR days, which was when I was a member of the Statistical Commission, exposed me not only to the world of data, which I was fairly innocent of. Some of you may know that NCR has a reputation for conducting its own household surveys and understanding issues of sampling. But that apart, it was while I was at NCAR that my current colleague, Amitabh Kant, who has been a very, very energetic CEO of Niti Aayog, which I'm now, I've recently been appointed as Vice Chairman. He commissioned NCAR to create the first set of tourism satellite accounts. And in some ways, I think the exercise that MOSPI is undertaking on the environment bears some relationship to tourism satellite accounts. And why do I say that? I say that because the classic framework of national accounts deals with production and income within a national boundary, and yet what we are aware of now is that the we are aware of two things. First, that a large volume of unpriced natural resources enter into production, what is now called natural capital, but because it's not priced, or hasn't been priced until recently, it doesn't figure in either the costs or the output side of the national accounts. And secondly, that there are cross-boundary dimensions to the draft on the environment, which therefore means that, as it were, the perimeter of the national accounts, which is the national economy, is somewhat deficient. So these are two of the innovations that going to environmental accounts imposes. You all know the saying that what gets measured gets done. You also, those of you who are economists, know that dealing with externalities is extremely hard, and these are, as it were, the two initiatives that are involved in proceeding to national accounts. Let me make one larger point, two larger points, before now turning to, in a sense, what MOSPI is attempting. The first is that the use of the environment is not all cost. We all know that the rich countries industrialized on the basis of fuel sources which now don't appear to be viable or sustainable, particularly coal. They also prospered on the basis of massive deforestation, which again we now recognize is detrimental to the environment. But before we see all of this as take and not give, we must also appreciate that this process of getting rich, industrialization, actually has resulted in enormous technological advance for the world as a whole, of which countries that are following the rich countries are beneficiaries. And it's precisely for this reason that the debate on a just transition, on climate justice, is proving to be so problematic, in particularly in the various COP conferences. None of this is to say that we should be making a draft on these resources without quantifying them, but it is to say that the issues of ethics and burden sharing that these raise are more complicated than perhaps is sometimes recognized. I should also, as some of you might know, I'm the vice chairman of Niti Aayog. The chairman is the Honorable Prime Minister, and some of you may have noted that barely 2 weeks ago, the Prime Minister on Environment Day relaunched his campaign, his so-called LIFE campaign, arguing that behavioral change, in addition to change in fuel sources, is going to be a necessary part of the solution to the world's environmental problems. And this is again why it's so important that the Social Statistics Division of MOSPI is involved in this. I'm sure Chief Statistician would know of the immense strides that national statistical offices elsewhere, particularly I'm most aware of the UK, have made in measuring time use, what goes on within the household. I know that there has been work on time use elsewhere in India. I'm not sure about MOSPI. But as face-to-face surveys become possible again, I see. Looking at, as it were, the consumption of environmental resources at the household level becomes relevant as well. Now, I've probably used up all my time on these introductory points, but let me just turn to the substance of what is being attempted, and also to say that if I didn't have my present job, I would have stayed all day, but I'm glad that staff from Niti Aayog would be here and will bring back to me the discussion between now and lunch. So the effect of human activity on the environment is one of our current most significant policy issues today, but there's also recognition of what is called natural capital, that continuing economic growth and human welfare are dependent on benefits from the environment, which at the moment are not necessarily priced. I've already talked about, as it were, the limitations of the conventional, what we call NSA, the SNA, the System of National Accounts, and the, as it were, the rules that from time to time are promulgated by the UN, but particularly as the environmental crisis has deepened, many voices have talked about incorporating natural capital into national accounts, and Chief Statistician of India has already mentioned the path-breaking work of Punnameta Dasgupta, who has been one of the leading intellects, I would say, in the issue of quantifying environmental factors in the national accounts. And as CSI said, the system of environmental economic accounting, the Central Framework of 2012, is now an accepted international standard for environmental and economic accounting. CSI also mentioned that the various initiatives that MOSPI has taken in adopting the CAA framework, but let me, before taking up all the time, just move to the final point that he made about ocean accounts, because this is, I think, another area of innovation. India is a country with a large coastline, and as some of you have seen in the recent discussion on fisheries subsidies at the WTO, this is a very important aspect of traditional livelihood as well. And for these reasons, the thrust area for the Government of India has been to evolve and strengthen its policies and programmatic efforts on India's blue economy, the sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, improve livelihoods and jobs, while preserving the health of the ocean ecosystem. Our coastline extends, I'm told, 7,500 kilometers across 9 states, sustains over 4 million fishermen, and so the Government of India's vision of New India by 2030 enunciated in February 29th the blue economy as one of the 10 core dimensions for growth. MOSPI has so far led efforts on the development of the ecosystem, of ecosystem extent and ecosystem condition accounts that include the wetland. This is all information I've been given by my staff. Wetland extent accounts, the water quality accounts, coastal water quality index, all of which are to be commended. And finally, since I think there are people from the UN here, and since this is integrally linked to the SDGs, let me mention that NITI has, I think, been a global pioneer in trying to push the Sustainable Development Goals down to the state and indeed even the district level. And it's my immense pleasure and pride that I will be representing India at a meeting of the High-Level Policy Forum in New York next week to review the India's progress and to share experiences with other development and planning ministers. So, sir, you have, I would argue, a more important responsibility than I do. Let me just say that the traditional partnership between Planning Commission, Niti Aayog, and MOSPI is one I hope to strengthen, and my eagerness to be present today is a sign of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your encouraging words. It is a fact that environment must be taken care of, and in the process of doing so, a creative approach needs to be adopted that would ensure not only maintaining it, but also restoring it. Environment and its concerns are truly a global threat and does not respect national boundaries. With the multiple reports on sustainability, environment concerns, and climate change ringing the alarm bell, the situation thus calls for an urgent, enhanced, and collective action to work together for the environment and sustainability. May I now invite Shri Ashish Chaturvedi, Head Environment, Energy and Resilience, UNDP India, to address the gathering present here physically and also those who have joined us virtually. Shri Ashish Chaturvedi has been working on the topics of environment, climate change, and circular economy in India for nearly 2 decades. His core expertise is in community-based adaptation, sustainable consumption and production, and environmental policy. Shri Chaturvedi is an avid action researcher and has published extensively in books, journals, and general interest magazines. He holds a PhD in economics from the University of California, and his academic training has been in the field of political economy. Sir.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here. Mr. Berry, Dr. Samanta, my friend Mr. Arun Kumar, as well as Mr. Asija, and ladies and gentlemen in the audience. My sort of experience of working on environmental accounts actually began as soon as I came back to India after my PhD. One of the first things happening at that time, sort of as part of Indo-German bilateral cooperation, was this green accounting of Indian states project, which a lot of you who've been sort of sitting here, who've been working in the social statistics division, would be aware of. And I worked extensively with the government of Andhra Pradesh on developing the first set of sort of accounts at the state government level. And that was way back. I think it was already 2008, 2009 that we actually started doing that work. And a lot of research kind of came out. Some of the most exciting work on environmental accounts at the sort of academic level was happening. And of course, a lot of that has been taken forward by the Social Statistics Division of MOSPI as well. The Vice Chairman's already spoken eloquently about the linkages between the economy and the environment. So I'm going to start from there, talk a little bit about SDGs, and then talk about the triple planetary crisis that we are in, and come back to sort of the engagement with well, NITI. UNDP and NITI work quite closely on SDG monitoring, and then maybe touch upon a couple of things around MOSPI engagement as well. So there has been, so of course, very significant feedback between the environment and the economy. It's very well sort of acknowledged, but it's becoming more and more salient, partly because of resource constraints, but also because of international and domestic priorities. And in India, our collective challenge, and in fact globally as well, are further compounded because we are confronted by triple planetary challenges, or crises, as some people call them, related to climate change, related to nature and biodiversity loss, and of course pollution in all its dimensions. And of course, when you're talking about oceans, you'll actually have to start thinking about the marine plastic pollution, and a lot of work happening around that as well. Now, in the specific case, in our specific case of India, the feedback between the economy and environment will be quite unique because we're trying to decarbonize the economy, and the Vice Chairman mentioned this, and we're also trying to decouple economic growth from resource use. So NITI's sort of set up sort of 11 committees on circularity. I had the privilege of being a member of 4 or 5 of those, and fascinating discussions on sort of how to decouple sort of resource use from economic growth. And the Prime Ministers, of course, talked about the circular economy mission as a major agenda, sort of driving the growth of this country as well. So while we're trying to decarbonize and also sort of decouple resource use, we're also at the same time pulling out millions of people out of poverty and providing a decent standard of living to our citizens. So this is a fairly unique sort of challenge. A lot of countries have kind of, the chairman, vice chairman already mentioned it, well, sort of you pollute and then you sort of get onto the environmental agenda, right? That's part of the story. But in our case, we actually have to sort of decarbonize, depollute, take care of our biodiversity as we grow. And I think that's a fairly sort of, and even sort of, I think the Chinese kind of avoided that a little bit, and sort of we are now sort of front and center in that discussion. Now, sort of course, the SDGs provide an overarching framework that create avenues for considering synergies as well as trade-off amongst policy goals. And these synergies and sort of trade-offs exist virtually in all policy problems. I think sort of you won't find any policy problem which doesn't have this sort of challenge. So it is really sort of imperative to formulate coherent policies that take more of a comprehensive rather than a siloed approach. And I think adopting SEA can actually really contribute to policy coherence because it's data which is going to tell you a very clear story about the trade-offs and the sort of synergies. And for various SDG targets that link environmental issues to economic and social development. So I think the SEA has significant potential. In fact, a recent assessment, I think it was in 2018-19, shows how 9 of the 17 goals can be supported by SEA data. I think some of you are nodding vigorously. You're aware of that assessment. You've been part of projects which have worked with those assessments. And in fact, furthermore, sort of the analysis shows that 40 indicators could actually come from the SEA framework, and maybe now there are more which you've worked on. Now, let me kind of segue into sort of an example each on climate, biodiversity, and circularity, which sort of are the triple challenges, how you overcome those triple challenges, and how SEA could be used to work on each of them, right? So, for instance, to mitigate carbon dioxide, well, sort of GHG emissions, a robust set of policies will be needed, and of course, the Panchamrit, which the Prime Minister announced, as well as the nationally determined contributions of the Government of India, are going in that direction to contribute to GHG emission reductions. But in addition to reducing emissions, policies would also need to focus on adaptation towards the changing climate. So it's not only about sort of, we're already facing climate impacts, and we really need to start thinking about how to deal with those impacts, how do we adapt to the changing climate, but also sort of reduce the losses and damages due to the changing climate, which includes sort of amongst other things, protecting coasts against sea level rises and anticipating floods and droughts. Now, one of the key problems related to climate change is this issue of carbon leakage. And we will hear more and more about it in the next few years because of certain policy sort of prescriptions coming out from other parts of the world. Now, that a country can reduce emissions while importing carbon-intensive products from other countries. And it's fairly well documented that there has been carbon leakage from developed countries to developing countries since the 1990s at least. In fact, total global emissions have increased because production has shifted from those countries with efficient technologies to countries with poor technologies. That's also sort of a fact. So the SEA can actually enhance our understanding of the implication of mitigation and adaptation policies, as well as provide data-driven insights on issues around carbon leakage. And you have an agenda for yourself going forward because this will come more and more into the mainstream discussions in the next few years, if not earlier. On biodiversity, the SEA can provide a measurement framework for ecosystem extent and condition, on the importance of ecosystem and the services that they provide, analyzing driving forces or choosing between policy options and instruments. In fact, the SEA is already being used in national policy making for ecosystems and biodiversity. The TEEB project was a massive sort of endeavor globally, and of course, India also did substantive work under the TEEB initiative. My last example is about circularity, and some of you would have heard of it, but over the last decade there has been like a sort of a cacophony of voices talking about sort of circularity, and I've had the pleasure, so when the Niti Aayog was just set up, I was back sort of on leave from teaching in the UK, and one of the first things I was asked to do was make a presentation on circular economy by the first first CEO of Niti, Sindhushri Khullar. And so I was actually talking about the impossibility of having a zero waste society at that moment, and how the transformation to a zero waste society in the sort of case of a globalized world is sort of almost like a statistical impossibility. Of course, the economy, sort of circular economy, is one in which resources are kept in the loop through recycling, remanufacturing, redesign, and by other means. Now, of course, the SEA can provide material flow accounts which show that where the material flows to, from, and within the economy. It is, of course, a powerful way to monitor progress towards a circular economy and to create effective policies as well. And given the fact that there's a massive agenda, which the Prime Minister has already provided with the launch of the Circular Economy Mission, I think there are significant sort of entry points to look at where materials enter the economy through mining or imports, and how they're used, how they're emitted to water, air, landfills, or nature. These examples of course, not only illustrate how SEA provides a better understanding of the triple planetary crisis or challenges that we are in, but also establishes that it is critical to pay close attention to environment stocks and flows as we strive to grow sustainability. And in fact, I'm glad that you actually now have a second session which focuses on oceans, because oceans are critical not only for what they are, but also for our biodiversity. Oceans are massive carbon sinks, and oceans also are now sort of a critical sufferer of global pollution. So when you actually start thinking about how these things are interrelated to each other, oceans actually bring all of this together. Of course, land-based pollution causes a lot of environmental, ocean pollution as well. So I'm glad that you're really already thinking about it. I'd like to end by saying that we need more data-driven conversations for policy and wider societal engagement. And in fact, as someone who's been a student of economics, a greater societal buy-in for transformative change would also require better data. I think we cannot have people get convinced by evidence. Of course, people get convinced by argumentation, by pushing, but at the end of the day, I still believe that evidence matters, data matters. And therefore, the quality of data is very important. And of course, if it comes from MOSPI, from the various divisions of MOSPI, they'll be much more credible. At UNDP, we're already working very closely with NITI on SDG monitoring, and we're actually delighted to have that partnership with NITI and want to strengthen it even more under your leadership, sir. And believe that SEA can further enhance the quality of policy responses. And of course, enhanced preparedness would enable more proactive and less reactive responses to global narratives. And of course, the recent every time there is a global index which is released, we have massive back and forth happening on those indices. I think our data capabilities are way stronger than just being reactive to those indices. Thanks very much.
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful words of wisdom. Sustainable development is indeed a path to a better future. In order to achieve sustainability, we will all have to unite our efforts. Policies backed with a targeted aim of sustainability are important and utmost required at current times. The real good sustainability creates for civilization now and in future surpasses the business growth attained through the exploitation of nature and its belongings. With these words, I would like to invite Shri Arun Kumar, Senior Economic Advisor, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, to give his discourse. Shri Arun Kumar is an Indian Economic Service Officer of 1993 batch. Over the past 29 years since he joined the government, he has worked in various capacities in several central ministries such as Ministry of Finance, Planning Commission, Ministry of Power, Ministry of MSME, and Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Presently, he is posted as Senior Economic Advisor in Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change since September 2021. Sir.
Good morning, everyone. Respected Vice Chairman, Niti Ayog, Dr. Berry, Secretary MOSPI, Dr. Samanta, UNDP India Environment Energy Head, Dr. Chaturvedi, DG MOSPI, Sri Hasija ji, participants from various ministries, departments and organizations, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed my pleasure to be here. Let me at the very outset compliment MOSPI for organizing this seminar on environmental accounts and its role in policy and decision making. It is very timely and apt. Environment lately has assumed great importance in discussions related to climate negotiations and even in foreign trade agreements discussions. In fact, new age foreign trade agreements, which are called FTA 2.0, sustainability is a must. All developed countries are insisting on it. So therefore I commend MOSPI on this webinar on environmental accounting that seeks to cover its various facets with respect to its role in policy making. I would be covering 4 aspects. First, as all of you are aware, nature or natural capital, as we say, provides a host of ecosystem services which are essential for our survival. The most obvious ecosystem services include food, water, plant material, fuel, building materials, medicines. There are also many less visible ecosystem services such as climate regulation and natural food flood defenses provided by forest, the billions of tons of carbon stored by mangroves, or pollination of crops by insects. Even less visible are cultural ecosystem services such as the inspiration taken from wildlife and the natural environment. When natural capital is not valued properly or appropriately, or it's not managed well, it leads to its degradation and loss, threatening to disrupt economic supply chains. It also results in increased frequency of extreme events like floods, droughts, heat stress that lead to forest fires, loss of human life and property, and decline in overall productivity. It may further cause conflict over scarce natural resources and damage to the most vulnerable population, resulting in their displacement or migration. The second aspect that I would touch upon is this conventional accounting system, which as we know computes GDP and all, do not actually fully capture either the contribution of environment or its degradation or its depletion. Its treatment of natural capital is very limited. For instance, a forest is not merely providing timber or non-timber forest produce. It sequesters carbon, purifies the air, and helps in regulating the water cycle. Therefore, the need for natural capital accounting has been felt. It provides a systemic framework to measure and report on stocks and flows of natural capital. The system of environmental economic accounting, SEIA as we call it, is the accepted international standard for environmental economic accounting. It lays down a framework for organizing and presenting statistics on the environment and its relationship with the economy. The third aspect that I would like to touch upon is that this concept of environmental accounts over last several years has been actually been incorporated in the management of environmental assets and in policy making in our country. I'd like to cite a few developments or initiatives to illustrate this point. For calculating the average net present value per hectare of forest in India, the monetary value of ecosystem services provided by the forest are used These include not only timber and fuel wood, but non-timber, fodder, ecotourism, bioprospecting, flagship service species, carbon sequestration values. These values form the basis of payment for compensatory afforestation to be made by any project proponent whenever forest land is diverted for non-forest use. There are other uses also in mineral accounts, ocean accounts, which we'll be discussing in the second half of this session. Even in the 13 DPRs for our rivers that has been recently launched for rejuvenation of 13 stretches of these 13 river stretches, in fact, the water provisioning services has also been factored into. This concept has also been used in environment and forest clearances which are granted by our ministry, takes into account the biodiversity layer in a given piece of land where project is being proposed. The criteria may result in some parts of land being declared inviolate, that is, no clearances would be granted for those reasons owing to high conservation values. The fourth aspect that I would like to briefly touch upon is, while environmental accounting has facilitated policy and decision making, there are still several challenges we need to address going forward. I mentioned a few, just a few. Data. There are times when the data may be very difficult to obtain for essential parameters requiring policy intervention. Like, for instance, extent of waste generated being handled by informal sector, or waste streams generated by MSMEs ending up into landfills, etc. These data are very difficult to get back. Similarly, having environmental aggregates below the subnational or at the subnational level, at the district level, or at grid level, present their own set of problems. Similarly, there are more than one data sources for the same concept results in varying data definitions. Periodic updating of data sources may follow different reference periods. For instance, period for species assessment of endemic species of an area may differ from the study of invasive species in the same region. There are also issues related to value of ecosystem services, which is fairly region specific. The limited number of studies pertaining to tropical regions like India, like ecosystem services valuation database is a major impediment to evaluation of such services. These are challenges which are not insurmountable. I'm sure these would get addressed and resolved as we go along. A good beginning has been made, and I'm sure efforts would continue. Finally, once again, I take this opportunity to congratulate MOSPI for having led the efforts on the development of ecosystem extent and ecosystem condition accounts since 2018. MOSPI's strategy for environmental accounting, which envisages preparation of energy, crop condition, and residual accounts, is also a step in the right direction. With these words, I convey my best wishes for a successful seminar. Thank you for having me here. आपको बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद.
Thank you, sir, for your encouraging words. I now request Shri M.M. Hasija, Director General Coordination and Administration, to propose the formal vote of thanks. Shri M.M. Hasija is an Indian Statistical Service Officer of 1985 batch. Shri Hasija is spearheading a whole gamut of work related to inter, and international coordination, training and capacity building, data informatics and innovation, and program implementation, to name just a few in the ministry. Sir.
Good morning. Respected Shri Suman K. Beri, Vice Chairman Niti Aayog, Shri Dr. G.P. Samanta, Chief Statistician of India and Secretary Government of India, Minister of Statistics and Program Implementation, Shri Ashish Chaturvedi, Head Environmental Energy and Resilience UNDP, Shri Arun Kumar, Senior Advisor, Ministry of Environment, Forest, Climate Change, distinguished participants from ministries, departments, ladies and gentlemen. It's my privilege to propose vote of thanks in the opening session of this seminar being organized by MSPI to celebrate the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. I am certain that today's deliberations will enable each one of us to have a better understanding and knowledge about the environment, accounting and its linkages with policy and decision making. On behalf of MSPI, I would like to place on record my deep sense of gratitude for our Chief Guest, Shri Suman K. Beri, Vice Chairperson Niti Aayog, for sparing his valuable time for delivering the inaugural address and outlining the issues of importance in environmental accounting. We are humbled by the presence of Head of Environment, Energy and Resilience, Shri Ashush Chaturvedi, for sparing his time to articulate the policy challenges in decoupling resources from the economy. We are also grateful to Shri Arun Kumar, Senior Economic Advisor, Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change, for making nature's values visible and challenges that are there in the data availability and collection. We sincerely appreciate the technical support provided by the World Bank and United Nations Environmental Programme for finalizing the concept note and speakers for this event. I also thank Dr. G.P. Samanta, Chief Statistician of India and Secretary of MSPI, for his motivation, guidance, and support towards organizing the event and for sparing his time to address the August gathering today. The event could not have been possible without the continuous efforts of officers and staff of Social Statistics Division, MSPI, who were ably guided by Shri S.L. Minaria, DG. Thank you all again for sparing your valuable time. I am sure MSPI will continue to receive your support and cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Environmental concerns and sustainability go hand in hand. These two dovetails perfectly when one considers India, where considerations of the environment have been deeply ingrained in the cultural ethos of the country. In accordance with the mandate of NSO and as per the recommendation of Professor Sir Partha Dasgupta Committee report on Green National Accounts in India, NSO adopted SIA in 2018. Since then, NSO has been compiling environment accounts on selected ecosystems. We have created a short video showing the highlights of India's progress in the domain of environment accounting. With the permission of the dignitaries, may I now request Ms. Deepika to play the video for us. While we enjoy the video, I request Shri Rakesh Kumar Maurya, Deputy Director General MOSPI, to present a small token of appreciation to all our distinguished guests. Dr. Suman K. Beri, Vice Chairman, Niti Aayog. Dr. G.P. Samanta, Chief Statistician of India and Secretary, MOSPI. Shri Ashish Chaturvedi, Head Environment, Energy and Resilience, UNDP, India. Shri Arun Kumar, Senior Economic Advisor, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Shri M.M. Hasija, Director General, Coordination and Administration. Thank you, sir. Kindly play the video.
I'm just coming on this. You continue. I'm just seeing on.
Mahotsav, an initiative of the Government of India to commemorate 75 years of independence and the glorious history of its people, culture and achievements.
As a part of the celebration, Social Statistics Division, National Statistical Office, Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation is organizing a seminar on Data for Sustainable Development, India's Environmental Accounts, and its role in policy and decision making in hybrid mode on 28th June 2022.
India has a long history of research on environmental aspects, ranging from theoretical concepts to its practical applications. But despite having vast richness of findings, these studies could not be concretized into a full set of accounts due to lack of comparability in the methods and definitions used.
In order to help the official statistical system, a high-level expert group under the chairmanship of Professor Sir Partha Dasgupta prepared a roadmap for compilation of the environmental economic accounts in India in compliance with the system of environmental economic accounts.
India adopted SIA in 2018 and has been regularly compiling environmental accounts. Till date, India has released 4 issues of the publication covering forest, land, cropland, biodiversity, water and other ecosystems. These publications covered extent, condition and the flow of selected ecosystem services.
NSO India has compiled ecosystem extent accounts which record the total area of each ecosystem classified by type within a specified area for land use and land cover, land degradation, wetlands and forests. The data source for accounts related to land is National Remote Sensing Center, while for the forests the data has been sourced from India State of Forest Report.
Some of the highlights of the ecosystem extent accounts are: the extent account for land reveals that the extent of built-up land cover has increased in 2015-16 from 2011-12 due to conversion of farmland and fallow land to urban land. The ratio of land consumption rate to population growth rate has also been compiled on an experimental basis for 52 million plus cities using GHSL data for 2000 and 2015. This indicator compares the growth in population with the growth in the footprints of urban areas. This is also one of the global indicators for SDG, namely 11.3.1.
From the Westland extent accounts, we can know that the extent of mining and industrial wastelands has slightly increased in 2015-16 from 2008-9, while the extent of degraded pasture has decreased for the period.
Wetland extent accounts shows that Gujarat has the highest percentage of total wetlands area. As per the forest extent accounts, India has 23.34% forests of total geographic area in 2017-18. Sikkim has the highest percentage of recorded forest area to the geographic area. Arunachal Pradesh has the highest share in growing stock, followed by Uttarakhand.
Ecosystem condition accounts record the condition of ecosystem assets in terms of selected characteristics at specific points in time. Over time, they record the changes to their condition and provide valuable information on the health of ecosystem.
NSO India has compiled statewide soil nutrient index using the data from different cycles of soil health card scheme launched by Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, which shows that nitrogen fertility status has been generally low in all cycles except for Nagaland.
Water quality accounts for ground as well as surface water depicts water quality as well as volume available for designated use. Coastal Water Quality Index were compiled for year 2011-15 based on the data received from National Center for Coastal Research.
Cropland condition accounts highlighting intensification, fragmentation and diversification of crops over the years have been compiled using data from Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. The percentage distribution of area operated by operational holdings shows that the percentage of small and marginal areas are increasing, while that of large area is decreasing over the years. Also, the effective number of crop species, which represents the crop diversity in the country, is around 18, and it is also increasing over the years.
Condition accounts of forests, which includes biodiversity assessment, a stock of carbon and forest fragmentation, has been compiled using data from India State of Forest report. The forest fragmentation analysis shows that the average patch size of forest is 0.95 square kilometer. Ecosystem provisioning services accounts record the supply of ecosystem services by ecosystem assets and the use of those services by economic units, including households. The ecosystem provisioning services are those ecosystem services representing the contributions to benefits that are extracted or harvested from ecosystems. Along with food, other types of provisioning services include drinking water, timber, wood fuel, natural gas, oils, plants that can be made into cloths and other materials, and medicinal benefits.
NSO India estimated district level provisioning services provided by croplands for 2005-06 to 2017-18 using data from Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. The estimates highlights that some of the states like Punjab, Haryana, Kerala, Telangana and Andhra Pradesh have high proportion of districts falling in high level of crop provisioning services.
In addition, statewide estimates of timber and non-timber provisioning services of forests were compiled for the year 2011-12 and 2017-18. During the years 2017-18, it is observed that value of timber provisioning services is about 0.10% of India's GDP, while that of non-timber forest products provisioning services is 0.06% of India's GDP.
Ecosystems provide many of the basic services that make life possible for people. Regulating and maintenance services are those ecosystem services resulting from the ability of ecosystems to regulate biological processes and to influence climate, hydrological and biochemical cycles, and thereby maintain environmental conditions beneficial to individuals and society. Regulating services include pollination, decomposition, water purification, erosion and flood control, and carbon storage and climate regulation.
Statewide estimates of soil erosion prevention services using the revised Universal Soil Loss Equation model were compiled for the years 2005-06, 2011-12 and 2015-16. The results show the amount of soil loss that could be prevented when land cover is croplands instead of bare soil.
State-wise estimates of carbon retention services using social cost of carbon approach were compiled for 2015-16 and 2017-18. The results show that the estimated value of carbon retention service for the year 2017-18 as rupees 438.49 thousand crore, which is 2.58% of GDP. For 2015-16, it was estimated as rupees 411.70 thousand crores.
Cultural services are the experiential and intangible services related to the perceived or actual qualities of ecosystems whose existence and functioning contributes to a range of cultural benefits, including how ecosystems play a role in local, national and global cultures, the building of knowledge and the spreading of ideas, creativity born from interactions with nature, music, art, architecture and recreation.
State-wise estimates for nature-based tourism services have been derived for 2008-9 and 2014-15 using data from survey on domestic tourism. The estimates show that states like Goa, Tamil Nadu, Puducherry and Himachal Pradesh have highest value of nature-based tourism service per square kilometers in 2014-15.
Apart from these, other accounts on thematic areas have also been compiled by NSO India. They include a species richness count calculated for IUCN Red List of Species for versions 2022, 2023, 2021-1 using IUCN Red List Toolbox for ArcMap.
NSO India participated in the European Union funded project Natural Capital Accounting and Valuation of Ecosystem Services, launched by United Nations Statistics Division and United Nations Environment Program. NSO India released the Linkages India project report as well as policy brief of the SIA ecosystem accounts for India.
NSO India also developed India EVL tool as part of the Linkages project, which is a searchable, comprehensive database of environmental values unique to India.
There is a growing interest at the policy level to conserve natural resources and also to meet development goals. These policies in turn require adequate and timely quality data. Environmental accounts are a powerful multi-purpose information framework suitable for assessing sustainable development and many other policy areas in the environmental sector.
Considering this, NSO India released a strategy for environmental economic accounts for India, identifying the scope of official environment accounts for the period 2022 to 2026. The strategy identifies the long-term and the short-term activities aligned with the areas that need to be targeted during the period. The strategy will help India move towards the targeted goal of making nature's value visible in economic decision making with an accelerated pace.
NSO India has recently released EnviStats India Glossary and EnviStats India FAQs, which will be useful to the users of EnviStats India to have access to the answers of specific queries pertaining to environment accounts and statistics at a single platform.
Though a lot has been achieved, lot many remains to be achieved. NSO India is constantly striving to enhance the scope and coverage of environmental accounts in India.
Looking forward for your support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed the in-house created video
India.
by SST. Thank you. We now break for tea. Tea is available just outside this hall. We'll again reassemble for the technical sessions in about 10 minutes. Welcome back after the break. We will now start with the technical sessions of the day. We have 2 technical sessions in today's seminar. The first session is on the linkages of System of Environment Economic Account (SEA) with the Sustainable Development Goals, while the second session is on the ocean accounting. The first session will be moderated by Ms. R. Savitri, Additional Director General, NSO India, and the second session, which is a panel discussion, will be moderated by Dr. Kavi Kumar. It is how we treat the earth and nurture it would define our sustenance in the future. Recently, environmental concerns and sustainability have assumed indisputable prominence in the global discourses. For a country like India, balancing economic growth, social equality, and environmental sustainability is a challenge, and India is constantly striving to strike the right balance between all these three. SEA accounts are developed in such a manner that it provides useful inputs for several SDG indicators. In this session, we will be hearing more about the different linkages of SEA and the SDGs, applications of SEA in policy and decision making, and several other aspects. But before that, let me introduce to you Ms. R. Savitri, Additional Director General, Social Statistics Division, MOSPI. She is an Indian Statistical Service Officer of 1986 batch. In her current capacity, she is primarily responsible for work related to sustainable development goals, environment accounts, gender statistics, and other social sector statistics. Her vast knowledge and expertise in the field of energy statistics has helped NSO initiate the process of compilation of energy accounts in India. Prior to that, she has worked in Ministry of Human Resource Development, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Women and Child Development, DGCA, Economic and Statistics Division, MOSPI, in various capacities. Ms. R. Savitri will be moderating this session. Over to you, ma'am.
Hello, am I audible? Yeah. So good morning to you all. We start with this first session of today's webinar. In the current times, the concerns about environment and sustainability have assumed indisputable prominence in the global discourses. But it's remarkable that the people in the Vedic times revered the nature and the environment and each of its constituents by carefully preserving them. The Vedic prayer, don't harm the environment, do not harm the water and the flora, earth is my mother, I am her son, may the waters remain fresh, do not harm the waters, invokes divine interventions to bless and protect the environment. In Bhagavad Gita, it goes a further step and says, Ishtan Bogan hi O Deva Dasyante Yagya Bhavitaha Taihi Dattan Apradayebhyo Yah Bhunkte Stena Eva Saha. Sorry for my Sanskrit thing. I know there are some UN participants also here. It says, if you just keep taking and without giving to the nature, you are as good as a thief. So let's all think more of protecting the environment, and I'll start with this particular session. At the core of the concept of sustainable development is the recognition that environmental commons such as atmosphere, forests, and oceans must be safeguarded as crucial sources of ecosystem services and natural resources. Hence, the need was felt to look beyond economy and start accounting the flow between economy and environment. We already have heard in the opening session, but to be very brief, SEA was adopted by UNSC in 2012 and MOSPI adopted the framework in 2018, and we have been publishing a series of environment accounts since then. We have published so far 4 such publications. In order to expand the coverage of environmental accounts in India, NSO released the 5-year strategy for compiling environment accounts in India 2022 to 2026, following the SIA structure. As most of you are aware, the Sustainable Development Goals adopted by the UN in 2015 integrates the 3 dimensions of development, namely economic, social, and environmental. SIA can be the basis for the development of coherent environmental economic SDG indicators. There are several global SDG indicators that could be in part or completely generated by the SIA. Looking at the importance of both SDGs and environment accounting in measuring the progress of a country's development, the topic has been selected for one of the events of the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav week. In this session, we have 4 speakers who would be talking on linkages between environmental accounting and SDGs and role of environmental accounting with a national and subnational perspective, as also the experience of other countries. I'll start with the first speaker of this session, Ms. Anshu Singh. She is an Indian Statistical Service Officer of 2000 batch. She has more than 20 years of experience of working in the Government of India in various capacities and is currently heading the Statistics Division of the Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change. In her ministry, she deals with environmental indicators mainly for goals related to climate change, life on land, and sustainable consumption. She is also coordinating with MOSPI in areas pertaining to natural capital accounting. She is also handling environmental statistics in various domains like protected areas, etc. May I now request Anshu to enlighten us?
Respected Secretary Sir, Savitri Ma'am, a guest from the World Bank, and Ms. Dasgupta from IAG, and all our esteemed participants in this seminar. I would like to give a small presentation on the linkages between the environmental accounts and the Sustainable Development Goals. So we have already understood the basics, and I would like to dwell upon that in a little detail. Could we have the presentation, please? Next. So firstly, although this has been discussed, why environmental accounts? So the first common thing between environmental accounts and the Sustainable Development Framework is that they are both measures going beyond GDP. So environmental accounts, it recognizes cost to environment in ways which conventional accounting does not. For example, the degradation due to pollution is explicitly accounted for, and it takes into account ecosystem conditions like wetland health and biodiversity. It also recognizes services like flood management by mangroves, carbon sequestration by ecosystems like wetlands and seagrasses. But apart from making nature services visible, it also makes those relationships between environment and economic more visible that would otherwise not be captured in the framework. The other framework that we are considering here is the agenda that results from the Agenda for Sustainable Development 2030, and that is the Sdg Framework. This agenda aims to leave no one behind, and that no one means includes the life in all its forms. It brings out together the interconnectivity of food, water, and which are necessary for livelihood of human beings, and ecosystem health, biodiversity. It also brings out that it is important to track climate change because that may impact the other dimensions of sustainability, namely economic and the social dimensions. Basically, the SIA Central Framework, which was adopted in 2012, captures stocks and flows, and ecosystem conditions within a spatial unit is enabled by the SIA-EA framework, the Ecosystem Accounting Framework, that has been adopted in March 2021. Next. So here is a simple definition that SIA transforms all the disparate economic and environmental information into internationally comparable statistics, and it is uniquely positioned to measure the progress towards SDGs. Next. The SDGs 2 related to hunger, 6 related to water, 7 related to energy, 8 that is mostly dealing with waste, 9, 11 that is dealing with sustainable cities, 12 that is mainly dealing with sustainable consumption, SDG 14 dealing with oceans, and 15 that is dealing with terrestrial biodiversity and life on land. These are the 9 SDGs that are supported by the SIA framework. This framework can be used to compile data to directly measure the SDG indicators as well as provide supplemental information for numerous others. Next. This is a small snapshot which tells you in very brief, you have the SDG goal of zero hunger, that of life on land, and another on climate change. How the different indicators are interconnected indicators can be derived is visible. For example, MOSPI has made the soil nutrient accounts. Now these nutrient accounts can help in deriving the indicators 2.4.2 and 15.3.1. Indicator SDG 2, 15.3 dealing with desertification and land restoration. So how the degradation of soil is contributing to desertification and how its management, better management, can help in land restoration. In a similar manner, we can see that there are interlinkages between the life on land, the climate change indicators. Next. SIA is explicitly a part of certain SDG targets. If we take the indicator 15.9.1, please go back. Yeah, 15.9.1 part B. This deals with integration of biodiversity values into the national accounting and reporting systems, and this has been defined as implementation of SIA. Thus, implementation of SIA per se becomes a way of measuring and monitoring progress towards this target. Similarly, if you take the indicator 12.B.1 that deals with sustainable tourism, then the development of tourism satellite accounts themselves becomes a way of measuring progress towards this target. The indicator 12.B.1 is the implementation of standard accounting tools to monitor the economic and environmental aspects of tourism. And hence, tourism satellite accounts will, this indicator can be derived from the tourism satellite accounts themselves. Next. If we take a simple accounts, that is forest accounts, both in terms of extent and the ecosystem services of carbon sequestration, etc., we can see how so many other indicators and targets are covered by them. If we take SDG 2 dealing with hunger, the nutritive value of wild plants for indigenous people that can be captured by the non-timber forest produce component of the forest accounts can contribute to measuring this target. Similarly, the water provisioning services of forests that can be captured, and it can help in showing movement towards the SDG 6 target. Sustainable timber harvesting monitoring. The moment data systems are in place and this is captured, then we have one of the components of sustainable consumption and production under SDG 12 that would be covered. Similarly, if we have the carbon stock account of forest, which measures carbon dioxide removal and the regulation of climate services, we can thus assess how there is a slowdown in the pace of climate change, and there is a contribution towards movement to SDG 13, which deals with the impact of climate change. Again, forests are the preserves of biodiversity, and they protect other terrestrial ecosystems within their confines like wetlands, and hence they contribute directly to the SDG 15 target. Mangrove ecosystems as part of forests safeguard the coastal ecosystems and marine life, and can show a movement towards SDG 15. So, properly prepared, comprehensive environment accounts of forestry can give you indicators of so many goals simultaneously. Next. The aspect of compensatory afforestation fund management has been touched upon, and the different components of which contribute to compensatory afforestation have the net present value. Now, net present value can also be derived from the forest accounts, and this basis can become a basis for the revision of NPV. Next. Now, the carbon stock of forests, if we take the target 15.2, which is sustainable forest management, then we have two things. One is the carbon stock of forest is the basis of the carbon sequestration service, and the data on this stock also constitute the basis for the indicator on sustainable forest management. Next. Now we come to the coastal ecosystem accounting, in which Ministry of Statistics is taking great initiative. The National Center for Sustainable Coastal Management in Chennai has already studied stock and assets of various land cover ecosystem functional units in these ecosystems, and they have used models like ARIES and INVEST to develop methodologies to quantify carbon sequestration, the coastal vulnerability potentials, and nutrient retention capacities of these units. NCSCM has applied the SIA-EA framework in coastal areas. The values that are derived from these areas are being taken into account while granting coastal zone clearances. And thus, we are having policy making, we are having the impact of these coastal accounts being used for granting clearances and hence a part of policy. Next. In a similar manner, considering the importance of tiger reserves for biodiversity conservation, a pilot study was commissioned by the National Tiger Conservation Authority for economic evaluation of select tiger reserves. So the institutions IIFM and the Center for Ecological Services Management collaborated and published these studies biennially from the period 2015 to 2019. They have brought out the value of the benefits, which has come to almost rupees 1.14 lakhs per hectare annually. In fact, these studies have also brought out the cost of reconstructing a tiger reserve ab initio, and that is a sizable amount. Next. So in this study relating to tiger reserves, there was a valuation of the tangible benefits like employment generation, agriculture, non-wood forest produce. But the report takes into account services like gene pool protection, sediment regulation, pollination services, water provisioning, nutrient recycling, and retention. So it has brought to our notice how valuable nature is and why protected areas like tiger reserves are important. Next. Going forward, there is a movement towards energy accounts being undertaken by MOSPI, and that will have a direct movement, it will show a direct movement in the sphere of SDG 7, that is ensuring access to affordable, reliable, sustainable and modern energy for all. Next. Similarly, water and waste related accounts, MOSPI has made water quality accounts in 19 and 21, which describe the quality of water resources, and these are assessed based on the quality for surface water, groundwater, coastal and marine water. Residual accounts are being attempted for the first time. Next. So these water quality accounts, not only are they telling us about SDG 6, not only they help us with these indicators, but they also help us in monitoring the progress and commitments which we have made in the multilateral environmental agreements, which are under the UNFCCC, the Convention for Biodiversity, the Ramsar Convention. Similarly, waste accounts and residual accounts which are being compiled will provide us data for our commitments under the waste related conventions Rotterdam, Stockholm, Basel, and Minamata. Next. So, with that, I come to the end of the presentation. I have tried to bring in the SDG indicators that can be derived from the accounts. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Anshu. It was a really short and brief presentation, clearly bringing out the linkages between SDGs and the CR accounts. Our next speaker is Dr. Punnameta Dasgupta. She is Chair, Professor and Head at the Environmental and Resource Economics Unit, Institute of Economic Growth, Delhi. Her expertise include research on valuation of ecosystem services, climate change adaptation and mitigation, econometric applications to environmental concerns, and health economics. She has published widely in international journals and books. She is and has been a member for several committees for the Government of India and international organizations. She will speak on implementation of environmental accounting in decision making, a national perspective. Over to you.
Next one, please. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and congratulations to WASPI for holding this ACAM discussion on this very important topic. I am very happy to have this opportunity to share some thoughts on this issue of environmental accounts. I'm not sure, but is there an echo? I seem to be getting it. Okay, thank you. So I actually come into this discussion wearing the hat of an economist, and what I would like to sort of add to what you have already heard from the speakers is the connect with understanding how the environmental accounting can help us in understanding and supporting many decisions that are taken which revolve around the interaction of the economic system with the environmental system in order to, fulfill our societal development well-being goals. And can we just please move on, somebody? Thank you. For example, we've been hearing, please do keep entering, thank you. Please do just enter it, thank you. So, and you can move on as I speak to the next one. So, for example, we have heard already from Dr. Singh about the importance of forest ecosystem services. And in fact, this was one of the areas in which I think WASPI, along with other stakeholders, did a lot of work. And we had, if you remember, the Supreme Court setting up the committee to determine net present value to be charged. Now that lens was the lens of a compensation for converting forest land, for diverting forest land for non-forestry purposes. But it was in some sense a recognition of the fact that our ecosystems and the services that they provide have immense value. And I think there has been a lot of effort, next one please, on this that has gone in on this subject over the decades. There have been many methodological developments. There has been both substantial support from within the country, from WASPI and other agencies, more recently also from the CAG's office, on trying to understand how best these environmental accounts contribute to our understanding of our economic system. Because the fact is that our economic system also has to be a sustainable system. And as a country, we are heavily dependent on natural resources. We are well endowed with natural resources. And therefore, we need to be able to see what is happening to these resources and to be able to account for them, to understand them so that we can optimize our production, consumption, resource utilization over a time period where we see these benefits flowing to just not our society, us, but also to the future generations, right? So we want to ensure that optimization in resource utilization takes place. We want to ensure the benefits of those flows. So that's from a purely economic hat, wearing that kind of a hat. And we know that there has been, India is seen as some sort of a leading example in this region in trying to put forth that perspective, as well as doing something on environmental accounting. We've had CSO sponsoring the 6 pilot studies in different states. Maybe ma'am will remember, you may remember, that was also a pioneering activity. We had forest accounts, water accounts that were done. Later we had the national level committee set up. I think the Punnameta Dasgupta committee was it. And then many other such initiatives did come up. And today we are cited in the global assessment of SIA as a stage 3 country in terms of implementation as per 2021 data, which is where we are doing regular compilation and dissemination of our environmental accounts. Now, the question is, how do we take it further forward? How we do more, right? Because that is what we want to do. We want to keep setting an example for us and understanding with confidence what is happening to our resources, as well as trying to provide leadership. Is this an opportunity also for us to be really smart? And I'm reminded of a recent seminar, an ACAM lecture, in fact, that Dr. Samantha gave at our institution, and where he spoke about the use of AI. And it was fascinating. And I started thinking, is this an opportune moment for us to really also be able to take forward environmental accounting using the plethora of tools and methods that are today available globally? Can we go to the next one, please? So I'm going to just skip this because I think everybody knows about it. The idea being simply to say that why the SIA framework, while there are many frameworks available globally for implementing environmental accounts, the SIA one is not only just a UN internationally agreed framework, but it makes a lot of sense in terms of being able to tie in and has shared many similar concepts with the standard system of national accounts. So it doesn't upset things. It does not create a great deal of, shall I say, differentiation or and impact adversely our existing system of national accounts. Your GDP is still going to be there, but you're also maybe heading towards different forms of understanding what happens to this GDP when you start accounting for natural resources. So there are many ways in which adopting environmental accounts can help us strengthen our understanding of our assets. Next, please. So for instance, it is also the case that we value, right? We know that we value we value manufactured capital, we value financial wealth. So, I mean, the World Bank had this pioneering efforts across the globe to help us realize the case for what it earlier called genuine wealth and genuine savings. And then moving on to the understanding that, hey, your natural capital accounting is important, and that you have to have, that there is wealth in your natural resources. So 2 points. One, our ecosystem services, our natural capital gives us a lot of values which are economic values and social values. So they are important in their own right. Secondly, that they are extremely well integrated with the concept of wealth for the economy. And that's also a reason for doing natural capital accounting. And thirdly, the derivative is SIA is one way. It's only one step in this whole process, but it is one big, big way forward, using internationally agreed methodology, integrating with established methodology of system of national accounts, which we are very comfortably doing in this country for years and years together. to be able to integrate with it and carry forward environmental accounts. Please, we'll skip this because these are more technical stuff on how we go about it. And next one, please. So another point that I wish to now flag is, so when we really go about environmental accounts, we know there are two steps. One is the physical accounts, getting all the biophysical data in place for natural resources and the interactions, transactions, activities, as we call them in technical language, with the economic system or the social system. But in that accounting process, in understanding all the interactions that go on across the biosphere, the economic system, and the social system, what we do understand is that in a large number of instances, the biophysical data is also not in place, especially as you start downscaling from the national level to the local level. Whereas for implementation and effective action, what policymakers are often looking for is grounded data on the basis of which actions can be proposed, effective implementation can be done. So there are two steps to the CIA, to a successful CIA. One is to get all your biophysical data in place. The next step is to monetize these values, right? So there are two steps. And it is very often, as an economist, I often come across this argument that, I'll wind up in 5 minutes, is that okay? As an economist, I often come across this argument, you economists value nature, you do an injustice to nature, you cannot value nature, there are so many services that we cannot value. I constantly hear that. And I accept that, that's perfectly true. But at the same time, there are also biophysical data that are equally difficult to track. Think of oceans, for instance. Defining boundaries, defining units can be extremely difficult. Similarly, we had the same hat when we first started looking at forest accounts. But hey, look where we are now. We've managed to reach somewhere, isn't it? And we are so proud of our achievements in that context. So I would say both biophysical and monetized or economic values of the stocks, the flows of environmental resources is something that we can work with. State-of-the-art methodologies are available, it's doable. Let's wear that hat for a moment, that we can do it, we can move forward with it, and we can do it in ways that are complementary to our developmental trajectories, to our aspirations as a society moving forward. There are, next one please. Next one. There are a lot of international experiences where actually data that has, and information that has been compiled on the CIA has been used for policy making. And so I purposely pick out applications from two developing countries. Guatemala for its forest accounts, which influenced many rules and laws which came into being on timber licensing, on strategies for production and use of fuel wood. And Botswana, next one please, where the water accounts, right, contributed hugely to the understanding of where is the maximum value added per cubic meter, which sectors across the country, what services used water and how. And policy applications ranged from their national water plans to even designing localized water rates and water allocations across services, across different users of water categories. So it is not that CIA is going to do this for you, but the idea is that if we adopt environmental accounts, judicious use of these accounts can help us meet many of the kind of sustainable development goals that Dr. Singh had just been referring to. Next, please. Now, of course, there are a lot of challenges, but there are challenges in anything that is new and forward-looking. But as I keep saying, in India, we've come a long way. And today you have a collaborative mechanism set up under ministries to look at it. You have the CAG, the Niti Aayog, the MOSPI, all coming together to try and move forward the agenda on it. And of course, major challenges of capacity constraints, of the required level of statistical infrastructure is also to be taken into account. Today, however, there are, on the other hand, there are also issues of what are the global resources available for us to do CR. Can we go to the next one, please? So as we do that, global scale support for funds, capacity building, the very fact that the GEF, the Global Environmental Facility, has included environmental accounting as a priority in its last round is something that we can look up to. We can look up to our own experiences in successfully setting up institutional frameworks for multi-stakeholder approaches, and creating hubs, platforms for interactions. We have them on the international level, and India contributes very positively to some of them. Maybe we can start looking at this from the national perspective. Next one, please. Because we have many interested states, as we have heard already. The other big ticket things to really look at is what is the possibility of integrating data and information within existing MIS systems. We are used to MIS now in a big way in the health sector, for instance. Is there scope to do so in other sectors, whether in forestry, water, state levels? And then, of course, if that's a good idea, there are questions of capacities, funding, training, and so on. The second thing is also to remember that methodology, if you look at the CR documents, is very well spelled out. If you can manage to go through all those very heavy documents, I say this at the risk of all the UN institution representatives who are present here. But once you manage to get through those documents, at the end of the day, the methodology is all spelled out. But there's a big effort needed to adopt those to Indian conditions. This I can say very convincingly based on my experience. This other issue is to do advocacy for mobilization of resources, for smart data, leverage the private sector. Some other countries are doing it. We have big companies now who are talking about their ESG commitments. How do we tie up with them? The next thing is just raising awareness, creating those platforms and hubs where you raise awareness and promote the interaction between potential users of this data. That brings support to the table. The next one, please. I'll skip this because I think I've covered most of it. Just the next one, please. Okay, good. So that's the best slide on the table. And I'll end with that. And I'm very happy to once again be able to say that I'm so excited that I'm here talking about these things. And thank you, ma'am, for your patience.
No, not at all. Thanks. In fact, we all thank you for this wonderful lecture, speech. And we have come to know a lot, that India has done a lot. And you're right. Actually, we are really encouraged by your words. At times when, like in our unit, when we sit to work on the accounts and we see that no data is available, we keep talking to the ministries for data. And like, you are right. Data is like a big difficulty, giving us difficulty in framing those accounts. But anyway, thanks a lot. We are also very thankful to you for being here. Our next speaker, Dr. Ramachandra, will be talking to us virtually. He's not here. He's chair, professor, and head at the Environmental and Resource Economics Unit. Sorry, I'm very sorry. He is at Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. He is an FIE, FIEE UK, and he obtained PhD in Ecology and Energy from the Indian Institute of Science. At present, he is the coordinator of Energy and Wetlands Research Group and convener of Environmental Information System at the Center for Ecological Sciences. During the past 20 years, he has established an active school of research in the area of energy and environment. He is a member of various committees on wetland. He is also serving in many committees of National Green Tribunal related to wetlands of Bangalore. He has published over 335 research papers in the reputed peer-reviewed international and national journals, 72 book chapters, 333 papers in the international and national symposiums, as well as 19 books. Dr. Ramachandra features in the recent global ranking of scientists of top 2% scientists. May now request Dr. Ramachandra to talk on the linkages of environmental accounts with policies at sub-national level. Are you able to connect him? Yeah. Dr. Ramachandra? I think we are not able to hear you. So I think maybe you are muted. He's speaking, no? He's speaking, yeah.
No, it is not muted.
Okay.
Shall I start my presentation?
Sure. Now
Ruchi,
we are able
sir,
to.
are you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, am I audible to all?
Yes, sir.
Madam Ruchi, am I audible to everyone?
Yes, sir, we are.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. And today I am presenting the work what we have done in Karnataka as far as the environmental accounting is concerned. I will bring out the linkages to the policies at the Karnataka level or the regional level. Now, when you look at the ecosystem, we get the various goods and services from the ecosystem for the human well-being. This we broadly call them as a provisioning, regulating and cultural services. The value of the ecosystem services, including the degradation cost, need to be understood for developing the appropriate policies towards the conservation and sustainable management of the ecosystem. That is where I have a problem with the GDP, the gross domestic product, which does not account the degradation aspect cost of the environment when we talk about the development. What we need to understand is development at what cost. If it is degrading the natural resources and if our children are deprived of the clean water and air, I would say we should not adopt that kind of developmental path in the country. To minimize the degradation, we need to account the degradation cost in GDP, that is called GEP. As far as Karnataka is concerned, we have done the natural capital accounting and the valuation of ecosystem services of the terrestrial as well as the aquatic ecosystem. And we have also talked about blue economy, which this exercise involves assessment of the ecosystem extent and the condition account, then valuation of the ecosystem services, then the asset accounting. So we followed the SIA protocol. This has been deliberated a few minutes back by the Madam Anshu Singh. So I will not get into the details of that because considering the time constraint, our report is available online. Now, when we look at how we proceeded, we use the big data to assess the ecosystem extent. We launched the satellites way back in the 70s, and every 21 or 30 days interval, we get the data. The multi-resolution data helps in natural capital, the assessment, the extent, and also the condition to some extent. And whatever the data we get through the remote sensors are nothing but the set of numbers which reflects the condition of the ecosystem. And we have used the other collateral data to analyze the remote sensing data like Survey of India, the topographic map. Then the other, the land, at the ground level, we have collected the field data using the GPS, the global positioning system. And also today, you have virtual data, Google Earth. We have used that. And finally, we have done the classification. And we have used the latest state-of-the-art technology to classify this data. We have used the artificial intelligence, the algorithm that are there, like the random forest and the maximum likelihood classifiers. And of course, these are all the machine learning algorithms. Now, we have also predicted what is going to happen in 10 years from now. We have used the hierarchical, the fuzzy analytical hierarchical modeling for that. And I'll be touching on that when I proceed towards the modeling. With this, let us look at the results of this one. This gives the Karnataka state how the things have changed from 1985 to 2019. when this protocol was developed by SIA, they wanted to do the pilot testing in the country. Through MOSPI, they approached us to with a request or suggestion asking us to do it for the 10 districts. But because of the COVID, since we were not moving, we were most of the time in the lab, my team could do it for not just for 10 districts, we did it for the entire Karnataka of 30 districts. Probably this is one project that has benefited because of the COVID, unfortunate COVID. Of course, we saw many calamities, many deaths in the system, but as far as the scientific progress is concerned, our team could deliver it for the 30 districts. And when you look at this data, what it shows is that there has been a degradation in the ecosystem. Environmental, the evergreen forest, which is 7.45% in 1985, has come down to 5.68%. Or the marsh deciduous forest, which is 5.71%, it has come down to 4.12%. See, when we analyze the remote sensing data, these are the pictures of the earth. It doesn't, they give the, no one can lie with the data. That is the advantage of the remote sensing data. Now, we also looked at the ecosystem conditions through the abiotic and biotic component and landscape level. At a landscape level, we have assessed the fragmentation and land surface temperature. And for the biotic ecosystem, we have looked at the species-based criteria and also the standing biomass and the carbon in the annual carbon sequestration, we have looked at it. And also we have looked at the physical parameters in terms of the soil quality, the water quality, etc. So now this gives the condition of the ecosystem. You see the fragmentation of the landscape in Karnataka, and this is the land surface temperature. When you see the fragmentation analysis, you see that the forests which were intact 16% in 1985, today it is fragmented, and we have intact forest is only 5.9%. That means there is a degradation happening in the system. Consequence of that is we have the increase in temperature, and of course the degradation in the ecosystem services also. Then we looked at we generated a composite matrix. As I said earlier, we have considered the abiotic parameter in terms of soil, the biotic in terms of flora and fauna, then the structural, above ground biomass, below ground biomass, and the biotic, net primary productivity. And at landscape level, we have done the fragmentation and the LST. That we have divided the region into the 5 degree by 5 minutes by 5 minutes the grids, or it is 9 kilometer by 9 kilometer grid, and in each grid we have computed what is the status as on the 2005 and in 2019 or 20. This gives a composite metric for considering all those the condition of the ecosystem. So this shows that there is a decline in the overall status of the ecosystem in the region. So now then the next part is we computed the ecosystem services, which includes the provisioning, regulating and cultural services. We have collected the data from the field as well as from the government agencies like Karnataka Forest Department, etc., wherein the quantity of the resources were available. Then we have calculated the residual value method, which is the difference between the market price minus the cost for the harvesting the resources and the transportation of the resources we have accounted. In the forest department, they term that as a seigniorage value or the residual value. That multiplication of the quantity with that benefit gives what is the kind of the benefit we get in terms of the provisioning services from the forest. Then similarly, we have done the regulating services and cultural services. Since my team has been working in the Western Ghats for the last 25 years, we have addressed many of these the regulating and cultural services, and my publications are there. So that's where quantifying this through the benefit transfer method was not a difficult exercise. The aggregation of the provisioning, regulating and cultural services give the total ecosystem supply value, or TSV, which is also we call it as a GEP. So now this gives in the physical unit the kind of the goods what we get from the forest. They say a forest department manages our forest in Karnataka through the various forest circles. We have collected the data for each of the circle, and we have quantified that, and this gives the spatial the spread of the resources, whether it is the timber or the bamboo, rosewood, etc. So then this gives the provisioning services of all the goods, the tangible benefit what we get. The regulating and cultural services, the district wise we have computed. The total ecosystem supply value is given here, the district wise. Now we know the district wise what is the kind of the goods and the services provided by forest ecosystem. To summarize what I said so far, if you look at the TSV of the state, which was 2,894 billion rupees in 2005, has come down to 1,835 billion rupees per year in 2019, which also shows that there is a degradation and we have to pay for the degradation cost. That is in terms of 35% decline in the services provided by an ecosystem. So this gives the forest and agriculture, the share-wise, this one, as I said earlier, the kind of the benefit what we get from the ecosystem. You see that 1,835 billion rupees per year by the forest ecosystem, and 1,077 billion rupees per year is from the agriculture ecosystem, and the total from the forest and agriculture, which is the terrestrial ecosystem, is about 2,912 billion rupees per year. So then we also calculated rupees per hectare per year, which gives the provisioning, regulating and cultural services. This also helps when we assess what is the compensation to be paid to this one when we divert the project for various developmental activities, the per hectare values, and of course we have to compute the NPV of that. So that is what we have done. The net, the present value of this one for the during 2005 to 2019, our the ecosystem, the terrestrial ecosystem, the worth of is about 73,000 billion rupees in 2005 at 2019 price, and today at 2019 it is about 47,000 billion rupees. That shows that there has been a 35% decline in the asset value because of the degradation of the ecosystem. Then we also try to visualize what is the likely scenario in 2033. We have the 5 scenarios: business as usual, agent-based scenario, then reserve forest protection, afforestation, and sustainable development policy scenario, which is a combination of reserve forest and the protection as well as the afforestation scenario. So we have used the hybrid fuzzy analytical hierarchical process for the projecting or visualizing what is the likely changes that is happens in the landscape in 2033. Now these are the constraints and these are the agents we have used for modeling, and this gives what is the likely land use in 2033 in under the scenarios, various scenarios. This is the sustainable development scenario. When you look at among the 5 scenarios, the SDP scenario seems to be the more apt for the regional level. So that means we need to do the reserve forest protection. At the same time, we need to take up the afforestation of the degraded landscape to sustain the resources in the landscape. You know, the afforestation with the native species of the flora certainly will help in retaining the water or the water resources. Along with that, we also get the tangible goods like the fruits and the other things. Okay, this gives the likely the services at 2019 price under the 5 scenario that is going to be, and this highlights that SDP scenario is the most appropriate one. That is what we need to adapt for in policies. So then with that, let me move to the wetland, the aquatic ecosystem. So we have done the detailed study in the some of the wetlands, which are in pristine state as well as in the polluted state. When in the pristine state, for example, the worth of the wetland is about 10,500 rupees per day per hectare in the form of fish, fodder, agriculture, etc. Whereas when it is polluted, the worth comes down to 20 rupees per day per hectare. Now, when you look at this, the degradation, the people like the fishermen, washerwomen, then the agriculture, the farmers, these are the people pay for the degradation, whereas people like us, we pollute the ecosystem. Now we have tried to compute the wetland services with the kind of the detailed field investigation, and with the other data compiled from the various other sources, we computed provisioning, regulating and cultural services as we did in the case of the terrestrial ecosystem. Now when you look at this ecosystem, this one, you see that the provisioning services amounts to about 49 billion rupees per year, while the regulating services from the water bodies amounts to 196 billion rupees, and cultural services about 37 billion rupees per year. And total ecosystem supply value is about 284 billion rupees per year. And if you look at the asset values of the aquatic ecosystems, the wetlands is about 7,320 billion rupees. So probably in the country, Karnataka is the only state where the accounting has been done for both the terrestrial as well as the aquatic ecosystem. Now when you look at this one, we have also tried to look at the valuation of the coastal ecosystem. We have looked at the kind of the goods what we get. For example, in Karnataka, we have a estuary called Aganashni estuary, where there are about 7,000 families depend on the estuary for their livelihood. They get the fish, the fodder, they get the sand and salt, which is about 10 lakh rupees per hectare per year. That is the worth of the blue economy or the coastal or the estuarine ecosystem in the region. And we are trying to see that with this kind of data, trying to see that whether the Aghnasni estuary could be included as or tagged as the Ramsar site of the international importance. So now the people who are interested, our reports are available online at this location. So you can download our report. As of now, we have put the valuation ecosystem services, while the extent condition report will be uploaded soon as our internal committee reviews and give the green signal for uploading on the net. And we could do it because of a bunch of youngsters, mainly the Bharat Sachur, Dr. Vinay, Dr. Bharat Aitar, Dr. Sinsi, and Dr. Asulva. These two have worked on the aquatic ecosystem, while the Bharat Sachur, Vinay, and Bharat worked on the terrestrial ecosystem. Thank you very much. This project was funded by the EU and it is implemented through the MOSP and the Ministry of Environment and Forest. And I thank everyone for this one. If there are any queries, I would be happy to answer. You can contact me through the email also. Yes, madam, I have completed the.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ramachandra, for this very enlightening presentation. Actually, Karnataka is maybe the only state which has gone so far with regard to environment accounting. Of course, we have the other states also attending virtually, and I hope they all benefit from your presentation. There was just, I think, one query in the chat box for Dr. Ramachandra by ZSI. If you could share us about algorithm used for aquatic ecosystem. So maybe you can take up with them, Dr. Ramachandra. So now we go to the last presenter, Pablo. He is a senior environmental economist with the World Bank based in New Delhi. Over the last years, he has prepared strategic multi-sector projects and delivered technical assistance to World Bank clients in South Asia, Latin America, and Africa, including work on natural capital accounting. He holds a PhD from, I'm sorry if I pronounce it wrong, Wageningen University, and has more than 18 years of experience working with development organizations, private sector, government agencies, and academia. He has a large number of publications on climate change and environmental economics to his credit. Mr. Pablo, may I request you to share with us your knowledge?
Yes, good morning, everyone, distinguished participants and speakers. First of all, many thanks for this invitation, and congratulations to all the excellent work you have done over the last decades. I think you have really set the bar very high for many other countries that are just starting on this to follow. So in this next 5 to 10 minutes, I will provide a very brief overview of some examples on natural capital accounting, particularly the work we have done with clients and how natural capital accounts inform policy making. I think one of the most important aspects is not just to look at the accounts, the numbers, to be accurate, etc., but really to be able to influence policy. And that's something that we have learned over the last 10 years through the WAVES program and other programs that we have on NCA. Next slide, please. Okay, so I will talk about the use of accounts in the policy cycle, the country examples, and some forward-looking ideas. Next slide. So the engagement over the last 10 years of the World Bank with our clients has focused on the following areas. First, of course, is information, generating the accounts. Second, to look at institutions and which will be the institutions that will be owning these accounts. Third one will be on developing tools and help to enhance capacity. So there has been a lot of work on the modeling, tools, assessments, and so on. And fourth one is decisions and policy impacts, which is what we're going to focus now. The work that we have done in the World Bank, also, of course, we want to influence our country programs to be more focused on environment and climate change issues, to be more relevant to our clients, and also we're using are financing instruments like development policy operations, investment project financing, and payment for resources scheme. So now let me explain a little bit this scheme, which is the actual implementation or the actual use of accounts in the policy cycle. I think this cycle is very familiar to all of you. You know, we have issues, problem identification, then the policy response, implementation, monitoring, review, and then we go back to identifying the issues that are remaining and so on. So if we take, for example, say forest accounts, so natural capital accounts, you can develop all the data needed to identify your problems. You know, the issues, what are the key issues? What's the rate of deforestation? What's the rate of land degradation, and so on. Then you use the accounts for the policy response. For example, if your policy response, you want to put some incentive scheme, payment for ecosystem services, financial transfer, etc. Then you can use your accounts to help with your models. For example, you can be using Sdg models, etc., to look those macro level implications. Then during implementation monitoring, of course, you also use your accounts to see how what are the changes over time, and then this can help you again to go back to the new issues that come after your policy cycle is complete. Next one. So on the practical aspects, let me just present 3 or 4 examples of our work. Again, you can find a lot of our reports are available on the website. We have the website of WAVES and the GPS program. But let's pick first country, Rwanda. And Rwanda is a country with the highest population density in Africa. And they have very strong capacity in the area of environment, climate financing, and so on. So there was a request early on to help them to develop land accounts, water accounts, and ecosystem accounts. And those were important not just for the process to get information, but really to influence critical policies and plans that were considered by the government. So after developing, for example, the land accounts, this was able to inform a land use master plan. And again, the land use master plan for Rwanda is very important because of the very high population density. So you really need to think about the next 20, 30, 40 years, you know, what was the urbanization patterns, areas for agriculture, areas for forestry, areas for urban, etc. So that was a very important milestone. On the water accounts, as a result of the analysis, this generated momentum at the Prime Minister's office, and then they created a water resource board. In the past, there was not an independent institution for managing water resources. It was a little bit ad hoc by the Ministry of Agriculture, Environment, but then by getting the information from the water accounts, there was the setting up of this institution, and now they have about 100 people really dedicated in issues related to water resource management. The third aspect, there's also the government planning, the Vision 2050, so the long-term planning of Rwanda, so the accounts were able to fit into that process. So that's one of the country examples. Let's go to the next one. Indonesia, again, there were accounts, national land cover accounts developed. They were also for specific areas like Sumatra and Kalimantan, land extent accounts. There was a lot of analytical work on the watershed protection, ecosystem accounts and peatlands and so on. So there was a comprehensive program work with the Indonesian government, and something very important that came up from the accounts development was it was able to inform and provide data to the low carbon development initiative for Indonesia, which is something very important. You know, they were looking at the long-term planning from a climate perspective and green growth perspective. So that was a very important milestone. And as we go back here to India, you know, there's a lot to talk about the long-term strategy. So if India has a target of net zero by 2070, how will these accounts that have been developing in India can help to inform that long-term strategy? And I think this is something that needs to be thought already now, since the decisions that you make now can influence investments that last 30, 40, 50 years. There was a lot of ownership on Indonesia from the Bapenas, which is the Ministry of Planning. There was some decrees. So, a coordinating group for natural capital accounting was established, and so on. So this is an example, again, from Indonesia. Let's go to the next one. So Guatemala, Dr. Dasgupta, you already presented this, so it's good that we are coordinating. I think just to add on the forest accounts, they were able also to feed into the National Development Plan of Guatemala. And also on the implementation of policies, there's always the concept that we have tried a lot in South America, in Latin and Central America, which deals with payment for ecosystem services. That you, of course, you have been using it here as well. And then the forest accounts were able to inform incentive schemes, payment for ecosystem service schemes for forest recovery and reforestation. And this led to about 20,000 beneficiaries. Of course, this can be scaled up in the future and so on. Let's go to the next country. So Botswana was again already presented by Dr. So I think the national was their master plan. And this was one of the first countries that we engaged from the World Bank. So there was, again, a lot of learning from this experience, sharing with others and so on. And let's go leave it to the next slide, the final. So forward looking, I think all of us will agree that we need to be using the accounts to inform policy making, and that's what everybody's working now and so on. And that policy making not only at the national level, but also at the subnational level. And also we can look even at regional collaboration in certain aspects. Also, when we talk with the macroeconomists, they traditionally use the CGE models, computable general equilibrium models. And most of the models, well, they have all the structure of the economy, the interactions, demand and supply, etc. But ecosystem services are being excluded. So how can you evaluate policies affecting the environment if the ecosystem services are excluded from this model? So one of the exercises we wanted to do now, and we have done in other countries, is to integrate natural capital into the macroeconomic models. We have, this is actually a platform that was developed by colleagues at the Inter-American Development Bank, but it's an open platform, and it helps us to integrate our CG models with land use change models. So the idea is you can look at the land use change dynamics, given different pressures that you have, different incentives, price regimes, and so on. You have also the invest model that has been already mentioned in this workshop, where you have the ecosystem service production and interactions. And then this will feed into your general equilibrium model. So if you package this three together, then you're going to have a much better macroeconomic model that you can be utilizing for a range of policy questions. So if you want to look at the optimal use of natural resources, optimal land allocation, the effects of coastal zones on building resilience, what's going to be the economic implications of the forest NDC? India has a very ambitious forest NDC. What will be the economic implications? What will be the gain in other ecosystem services beyond carbon and so on? So this is a tool that we are developing. So we'll be looking forward to work with the government, with institutions here. Hopefully there's another space that we can go a little bit more deeper into this topic. But yeah, so now this is a little bit the summary of the discussion, and I look forward to having more conversations during the lunch. Again, I have moved to India in February of this year, and I will be staying for the next 4 years. So you'll go see me often. So you can just drop by and see me in the bank office, and we can have much more detailed conversations. So thanks again for this invitation.
Using it in the policy making. Now we can leave the session open for some question answers. Anyone having? Yes. Yes, sir. Yeah.
No, I have no question, but I thought I would feel in my duty to answer by recognize or appreciate the kind of discussion all the speakers brought on the table today, which are eye-opener to me. And also, I noticed a couple of things. Two, three speakers in their example countries which have many are common. You pose the system that we are not concerned with environment account accountant. So am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So my voice is still okay. I was a teacher some time back. Okay. So it shows that we are not only concerned, it is also in right expertise and hands of right experts, because they are really collective taking a views and vision they're having, and they are also giving the wisdom. And like Professor Ramachandran, Professor Dasgupta, and also Mr. Pablo also warned us, alarmed us, whatever we do, we should do it within 4 years. Otherwise, we are not getting to his service or his expertise. Okay. And also, it is also heartening to me to see our own person Angshu there. Okay. And I'm really happy that within Government of India also we are developing the expertise and own capacity. Of course, Savitri Madam also there, name goes without saying. She is also taking care of this. So I'm really benefited a lot. And I could see the broad perspective today from this session, that what is its linkage of environment and SDG. SDG is something we must achieve it, and with that goal, and if environment also accounting and those things are so integrated, one day delay is so much delay, so we cannot delay further. Let us take it forward on this 75 years of Azadi Ka Amrut Mahotsav. We should try our best at the earliest to achieve all the goals, and I hope we will be successful. Thank you so much, all the speakers, for motivating at least me and also giving me a lot of knowledge to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anything in the chat box also could be? Nothing? Yeah.
I think thank you very much. This was very informative session. All speakers, thanks a lot. One important point which we were discussing before starting the session with Dr. Dasgupta and Pablo, and that is about, on some of the aspects where we are showing very well, MOSPI has done a lot of good work on that, and that is on forest accounts. So I think there are two elements of moving forward, as Sir has pointed out. One is where you have really done well, and second, where you want to go ahead on other lines. I think this next session will be on the water accounts and other where we want to go further. But on the forest account, we need to stabilize now further. So this is important that at MOSPI level or at NITI Aayog's level, some discussion should start as a platform with the set of professionals to move it further to the next steps. And ma'am, Anshu is here to move towards policy side with the Ministry of Environment and Forest now. At least on the forest side and on the environmental economic side, it's very important that next step be taken. Some of the states have already shown interest. Karnataka just made a presentation, but Himachal has done initial start. Uttarakhand has announced their initiatives, and UNEP has done a lot of work there from analysis perspective. I think let's come together and start working on stabilizing that to the next step, to showcase that India can also become lighthouse in this. Not only the other countries, but we should also be shown there as international best practices. So looking forward for that kind of initiative, ma'am, maybe at the NITI Aayog level or MOSPI level. And I mean, the group is already ready. They have already shown that they want to move further. So we'll be very happy to work together on this, sir. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, as you say, we really need to take accounts where we have proceeded a little bit, use it in policy making. Unless that is done, for the other accounts, when we look for data will come only when the policy makers understand the value of this data and how these accounts are useful. Thanks a lot for that.
Yeah, first of all, congratulations to all the speakers for this very informative panel discussion. And Madam, I'm sure most of the colleagues would agree with me that long back I was posted in Ministry of Water Resources, Central Water Commission. And at that time, I have been told to make, our team have been told to make an index of water quality. I am just sharing this experience because I just want to congratulate everybody for, that the kind of orbit change we have made in the data collection process. So at that time, there was no information available, and we have been compiling data for 25 countries on the water quality, and we have selected 25 countries on the basis of number of dams they were having. And this information was not at all available in any Google or any platform. And literally, we had to go to embassies, their libraries, and then we have opened up their books. Whatever data was available, I mean, the data was very ancient, like 10 years back, 8 years back, that kind of information. And I mean, we have literally compiled that information, and somehow we have developed that kind of compendium. But I'm very glad to see that so much information is right now available. And kudos to, of course, Social Statistics Division of Ministry of Statistics, and of course, Ministry of Environment. Now, my second observation is, since I have been seeing a lot of experts over here, that everybody has talked about Guatemala and this Botswana. So definitely, I mean, it's great news that these countries are also doing, and you have been helping them in developing this kind of accounting system. But we would also like to know the best practices, as somebody has said earlier, that the best practices which is happening right now in the world, because we don't see ourselves lagging behind with any of the developed countries. So why not we should consider, like for UK, US, or many other countries who are actually at the helm of the affairs in these kind of accounting. So just my request to all of you that if that can be shared to us, that would be very grateful. Thank you, and congratulations once again.
Yeah, well, no, thanks very much. Certainly, I think we have quite a large network of experts on NCA. I think from Canada, we can think about organizing a session where we can bring the people from Canada, people from the Netherlands, Sweden. We're happy to do that. I don't want to talk on behalf of other governments, but of course there's a lot of work, and I totally agree. I think what the examples that I presented is mostly because they are part of the World Bank programs, right? So we work with them, we help them with the accounts, but then we also have our lending programs and so on. But certainly I take your note, and we're happy to, if there's another opportunity, we can bring those experiences from the OECD countries, and we have that network available. Thanks.
Yeah, actually, Netherlands is doing a lot, and we are, working with them to prepare our energy accounts and waste accounts. We are trying to understand from them what they have done. Maybe in some next session, we bring in participants from other countries as well. Now that, the countries, world has opened up and people have started moving, so we can think of one such conference where we bring in experts, countries which are working in these lines. Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
A very important point you flagged, and of course ma'am has already said that there are these collaborations that are ongoing. What I would just like to add is that the UN has its committee of experts itself, who have been under the UNSD, who are actually meant to help all countries come at par and be able to actually do it. So there's an expert body which has been put together for this facilitation purposes under the UNSD itself. It's a global thing. Apart from this, there are also initiatives like the London Group, which is like a city's informal group, started informally, but they are also one large body which does, this sort of kind of capacity building and resource sharing for these purposes. And I think it's a very interesting idea, because perhaps, ma'am, we can also think of setting up similar kind of platforms for India itself, because India is huge and is endowed heavily with a range of natural resources. So maybe it is something to think about for MOSPI. If it's possible to set up that kind of exchange and learning platform, it would be a great idea. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just ma'am, I just wanted to inform you that India is India is the member of the UNCA committee, and regularly in touching with while developing the methodology for the various ecosystem account. And the first time India is also has been become a member of the UNCR Bureau Committee. We have developed the several concept papers for discussion in the UNCR committee and as well as the London group for the environmental accounting. Thank you.
So I think if this nothing else, we can. I'm very thankful to all the 4 speakers for sharing your knowledge. It has been very fruitful, and we will, start working in the directions that suggestions that have come from participants as well as the speakers. So, Sudipta, we can go to the next.
Thank you to all the speakers and participants for actively participating in this discussion. May I now request Shri Rakesh Kumar Maurya, Deputy Director General, to express his gratitude to all the speakers of the session by presenting a small memento of appreciation on behalf of Social Statistics Division, NSO MOSPI. A big round of applause for Ms. Anshu Singh, Deputy Director General, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Ms. Punnameta Dasgupta, Professor, Institute of Economic Growth. Mr. Pablo, Senior Environmental Economist from World Bank. And Ms. R. Savitri, Additional Director General, Social Statistics Division, MOSPI. Thank you, sir. Thank you all. Today, as more and more people are becoming conscious and responsible towards the environment, we hope that a day would soon come when our planet, the flora and the fauna it offers, would be cherished and respected by us every minute, every day. We now move to the second technical session of the day, which is focused on the discussion on ocean accounting. It is my pleasure to inform you that NSO India has joined the Global Ocean Accounts Partnership and is determined to compile ocean accounts in the coming years. The current session is a panel discussion on ocean accounting, which will be moderated by Dr. K.S. Kavikumar. Dr. Kumar is currently working as professor at Madras School of Economics, Chennai. He has more than 25 years of experience in research, teaching, and industry. His research interests include economics of the environment, the economics of climate change, and development economics. Dr. Kumar has been associated with various international and national institutions, including the World Bank, International Institute for Applied System Analysis, Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, GIZ, British High Commission, Tata Energy Research Institute, Institute of Economic Growth, etc., to name a few, for various research assignments. He has coordinated several activities of the Center for Excellence in Environmental Economics, supported by Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Among the panelists, we have Dr. TVS Uday Bhaskar, scientist in COES, Hyderabad, Dr. P. Shinoj from CMFRI Kochi, Dr. K. Ramu, scientist NCCR, and Mr. James from World Bank. Each of the panelists would be talking about different perspectives about the ocean accounting, followed by a discussion. I now hand over the floor to Dr. Kavikumar. Dr. Kumar.
communities, and equally importantly, preserving the marine biodiversity. The other way to look at the policy relevance of ocean accounts is they serve as the data foundation for area-based planning efforts. India has made significant progress in this direction by looking at the coastal and marine spatial plans. We have examples from states like Pondicherry, West Bengal, and islands like Lakshadweep. And we also have a large-scale exercise just recently finished in terms of developing the framework and action plan for National Coastal and Marine Spatial Plan, which was spearheaded by Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Of course, the ocean accounts have a direct relevance to the ongoing environmental economic accounting that has been we have been discussing since morning here. So which is, of course, WASPI has been quite, WASPI as well as MOEFCC have been at the forefront of doing these exercises. Ocean accounts have been, as we have been told repeatedly by many speakers since morning, has been identified as one of the focus areas for the strategy for environment economic accounts in India over the next 5 years. So in all these fronts, it looks pertinent to have a clearer and more wider understanding of ocean accounts. Another way to look at the need for ocean accounts is that first of all, we have the economic, social, and environmental data concerning the oceans is highly fragmented, probably in a non-standardized format, and it's only partially represented in our national accounting system. So there is a definite need to kind of bring it on board into the national accounting system in a more structured manner. Of course, also ocean accounts organize the relevant data into a common framework using agreed statistical standards and methods and formats that are commonly used by the NSO's National Statistical Offices. Of course, as we have discussed from the previous session, ocean accounts provide countries with means to go beyond the GDP and essentially align with sustainable development goals, in line with goals such as Sdg 14, 15.9, 17.19, and so on. So these are all obvious ways in which we need to be actually looking at the reason for involving ourselves with the ocean accounts. As has been mentioned, India is now a member of the Global Ocean Accounting Partnership, and there has been a lot of literature on this actually in developing the framework and so on. The framework as such is not quite different from the environmental accounting framework as such. It starts with an asset framework, flows to the economy, also flows into the environment from the economy, and then the way in which the contribution is made to the economy is highlighted through the various indices, and also the governance system that is prevailing over is captured in this accounting framework. So it's a comprehensive framework that actually brings on board both the condition as well as the value of the ocean goods and services. There have been some bits and pieces of works on the valuation part. There has been work done in the recent past on trying to put some kind of a economic valuation at a macro level on the marine coastal ecosystem services, goods and services. So it is not a comprehensive one, but nevertheless we do have at least get some sense of what is it overall value. This is measured in terms of 2012-13 in rupees 1.5 trillion, which essentially comprises around 3.2% of the NNP in that year. It's not, as I said already, not the comprehensive one, but gives us a sense of direction to look at. Within this, of course, the provisioning is considered assessed as 26%. The maximum, of course, was accounting for regulating services, which currently doesn't get into their accounting framework. Recreational also partially gets accounted in our 30% of the 1.5 trillion that we talked about earlier is essentially getting into the. But what are the issues that we need to be flagging for discussion here? I think there are a lot of challenges while trying to do ocean accounts. Some of them I just quickly flag here before I leave it to the floor and esteemed speakers to dwell upon. One is about the choice of ecosystem goods and services. Should we be looking at what we already know, or easy to handle kind of sectors and services, or well deep into things that are currently not properly getting accounted, like for instance the regulatory services that has been highlighted from the previous study as one of the kind of more important things. The other issue is choice of units, standard definitions of spatial. There should be some kind of should there be a standard definition for spatial assessment units, or can units differ from country to country, or pilot studies to subnational to national level assessments? These are issues that of course need to be well thought about. The data gaps, of course, is major issues. For instance, a lot can be achieved through the existing data and global data sets, national as well as the global data sets. But the way in which the informal and subsistence nature of dependence prevails in countries like India by a large amount of the coastal communities on coastal resources, it makes it imperative to address the data gaps a little more sensitively to avoid undervaluation. And that's a major concern with regard to ocean accounts, like any other accounts, but probably a little more problematic in case of ocean accounts. The other issues, of course, is major concern in the ocean accounts, in my view, is the stocks versus flows accounts. Unlike the terrestrial ecosystems, it could be significantly more challenging to develop stock accounts in the ocean context. Such exercise is not only kind of required for better conceptual clarity and accounting principles and methodological issues, but also greater cooperation and collaboration between sovereign nations, because the oceans are obviously, there is no jurisdictional boundaries that you can easily draw there. So those are issues that we need to be concerned about. Of course, also the issues related to upscaling from pilot studies. Many global evidences right now are available at pilot studies, micro regions and so on. Taking them or upscaling them from those pilot studies to subnational or national level ocean accounting will call upon certain conceptual clarity and also standardization processes. And those are the issues probably we need to be looking at a little more carefully. These are some just issues I'm flagging upfront for discussion, but I'm sure our esteemed speakers will be taking us through many more issues to be looking at. The structure as such for the panel is fairly tight. We have around 4 speakers talking to us on a variety of issues. I'll introduce one by one each of them, but first to start with, we have Dr. TVS Uday Bhaskar. He's a scientist at the Indian National Center for Ocean Information Services, Hyderabad. He's heading the Ocean Data Management Division, which archives heterogeneous data from in-situ remote sensing and ocean general circulation models, etc. He's also coordinating the International Training Center for Operational Oceanography, which is the regional training center under the Ocean Teacher Global Academy of Belgium. So Dr. Uday Bhaskar would be speaking to us on the vision for India's blue economy and the role of national ocean accounts. I'll now hand over the floor to Dr. Uday Bhaskar.
Yeah, good afternoon. Hope you're able to hear me.
Yes, we can hear you, Dr.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just share my presentation. Can the host enable me to present from my system, please?
Are you able to share?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Hope you're able to see my presentation.
Not yet.
Able to see?
I'm afraid not yet. Is there anybody else is able to see? Sorry, we are all operating remotely, so.
No.
Yeah, okay. Can you try once again, Dr. Bhaskar?
Yes.
Yeah, we can see now.
Yeah, we are able to.
We can see now, Dr. Bhaskar. Please go ahead.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thanks for making me a part of this particular session. So I'll be giving a brief about the vision for India's blue economy and the role of national ocean accounts. But of course, my work was made easy by our moderator. He has already given enough information about that. So I'll be just skipping as much as possible what he has covered and then try to cover with respect to the service components from our organization and how they account for the blue economy and also how they can be taken into account for the national ocean accounts that is going to be like accounted for in the future. So this is a brief outline. So I'll be slightly touching upon the vision of blue economy, India's vision, and then also talk about the national ocean accounting. And then I'll then talk about what is our mission and then who are our stakeholders, because that's how they account for our blue economy. And then I talk about briefly about some of the services, how they account for blue economy, and also then what is the impact of these services on the blue economy. So this is in brief I'm going to talk about. So coming to the vision, I think most of you are already aware of this. First introduced in 1994 under the Sdg goals. And then by offering his 74th Independence Day speech, he has further emphasized on this, saying like we need to be recognizing the importance of economic and strategic access for the TRIPS, which forms the basis for a robust principle for India. And we are happy to say, like, that India is the first country to move forward in this aspect of blue economy, whereas it has formed the Department of Ocean Development way back in 1980s. Later it was reorganized as Ministry of Earth Sciences. And this Ministry of Earth Sciences, where I work, has already come up with many programs that can really make a big change with respect to the blue economy. And the programs like deep ocean innovation and ocean operating out in the sea, which we call the launching of the data buoys all across the Indian coast. All these are accounting for this blue economy initiative because these are all very much involved in many of the coastal services. There are many sister concerns of our and also many of the organizations which are working on the government of India, and they are already working toward these goals. So, for example, I just mentioned few here: coastal services, fisheries, maritime trade, and all. We cover some of the aspects from inquiries which I work for, and marine-related technologies, offshore and coastal energies, where our sister concern NIOT in Chennai works for, and deep sea minerals and all that NIOT in Chennai and NCP in Goa. So I just not covered the exhaustive list, but just to say, like, few of these, the additions for the blue economy is being already upon by these organizations across scattered.
Hello. Sorry for the interruptions. For those who have joined us physically, you may please join the WebEx meeting through the meeting number and the password by registration link and by using the meeting number and the password. You may note the meeting number 2515-323-5483. I repeat.
Industry, offshore hydrocarbons, and then marine biotechnology. Tourism, as I already mentioned, some of the things like harmful algal blooms, coral reefs.
2515-323-5483, and the password is AKAM1234. Thank you.
Mainly for disaster. And we use like science-based products and services that can support the development of the blue economy. We have a marine integrated management based on ecological environments. You can see like we do a lot of iron case analysis, climate projections, seasonal to sub-seasonal forecasts, and all. So we do for making based type of that support economy. So this one slide shows how we have a real-time observations from various sources, heterogeneous platforms from remote institute and other, which we use for modeling and research, and we generate ocean information advisory services, which we distribute in multi-mode to end users all across the coast. All of them account for huge impact on the blue economy. You can see these are the stakeholders, and these are the services that we provide for the coastal population. And these are the independent studies that have been done on the impact of the socio-economic impacts of our services. For example, there is an independent study by NCR done in 2010, which talks about the impact of the EFZ for the blue economy estimated to be between 34,000 to 50,000 crores. And they also have studied ICAR, have studied how much reduction in the carbon dioxide because of this particular PFZ service that INCOS is giving, which comes around 150,000 kilograms of reduction. That like really goes for a clean environment, and it starts also like if you do a no version, how much it really contributes to, for example, around 4,000, and these are all studies that talks about how much
So Dr. Shinos will be speaking to us on accounting for marine fisheries, aquaculture, and fish processing and fish provisioning services. Over to you, Dr. Shinos.
Good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yes, Dr. Shinos, please go.
Discussion. So my topic today is accounting for marine fisheries, aquaculture, fish processing, and fish provisioning services as part of blue accounting. Is it moving? Okay. Yeah. Let me start by emphasizing on the importance of fisheries sector in India's economy. Fisheries sector has been growing at a relatively very fast pace over years. Over the last one decade, the sector has been growing at a rate of close to 10%. India's total fish production in 2019-20 was about 13.4 million metric tons, of which 3.72 came from marine sector and 10.43 million metric tons came from inland sector. The sector contributes about 1.24% to the gross value added of India's GDP, of India, and about 7.28% of GV of agriculture and allied sectors. Fishery sector is also a major exporting sector, wherein about 1.28 million metric tons of seafood products are being exported. Was exported in 2019-20, which was valued at more than 46,000 crores. Now, let me just give a brief of the scope of my presentation. I'll be strictly limiting my presentation only to marine fisheries, aquaculture and post-harvest sector. I'll be focusing mainly on identification of sectors and subsectors, including untapped activities that fall in the purview of fisheries and aquaculture in blue economy. That means I will not be touching upon other non-fishery or non-aquaculture sectors which could be part of blue economy. I will also not talk about ecosystem services as part of the ocean economy. Further, I'll also give some. I'll try to give some insights on the sources of data and other information related to blue accounting purpose. This is the overview of my presentation. I'll first discuss fisheries and aquaculture accounting vis-a-vis blue economy definition, broad coverage of sectors and subsectors, data status in fisheries, aquaculture and post-harvest sectors, techno-economics of marine fisheries and mariculture, because this becomes part of input accounting, particularly to reach at some important coefficients in the accounting process, and other relevant points. Sorry, the slide is moving a little slower. Okay. We have a beautiful definition of blue economy, which was given by the working group of Economic Advisory Council of Prime Minister of India. So as per this definition, it says that blue economy refers to exploring and optimizing the potential of oceans and seas, which are under India's legal jurisdiction for socio-economic development while presenting the health of oceans. The blue economy links production and consumption to capacity and envisages integrated approach to economic development and environmental sustainability. It covers both marine, that is offshore resources, as well as coastal, that is onshore resources. So there is a perfect definition for blue economy. But then now is the time for us to understand, dig deeper into what are the concepts, what are the, boundaries of these sectors or subsectors, like what is meant by offshore resources, what are coastal fishing and onshore fishery related activities, and so on. So there are some relevant questions in this regard. What do the terms offshore, coastal, onshore refer to in this context? What is the overall jurisdiction of blue economy in terms of geographic coverage as well as activities? Whether inland freshwater fishing and aquaculture should be part of blue economy accounting? So what is the what is the scope of onshore? How far it is, and so on. Whether the entire marine fish value chain, from landing till the fish reaches consumers, as well as fishing related industries, be part of blue economy accounting irrespective of geographic boundaries. So these are some relevant questions that we should be addressing at this stage. Yeah, so for that purpose, I think there should be better clarity on some of the terminology, some of the technical terms that are used in this context. So we have near shore or coastal fisheries, which is happening within 12 nautical mile from the shoreline, or this is typically the territorial water fishing activity, which is fully under the jurisdiction of state governments, coastal state governments. Then beyond that, fishing is called offshore fisheries. That happens between 12 nautical miles to 200 nautical miles. 200 nautical miles is the distance from shore to till the last point of India's legal jurisdiction. The entire area is called exclusive economic zone. Then after that, we have internal waters fishery, fishery associated with estuaries towards the land, associated with estuaries, backwaters, creeks, lagoons, etc. Then there is another term called distant water fisheries, which is happening beyond 200 nautical miles, which is there are things about whether it is legally which comes under legal jurisdiction of India, or whether it is areas beyond national jurisdiction and so on. So those things have to be clarified. And then we have deep sea fisheries in high seas, using trawls and lines operating high seas for fishing in the depths below 200 meters. So this term is strictly defined in terms of depth of fishing, and not in terms of distance of fishing from the shore. And then and after that we have onshore fisheries, wherein fisheries, aquaculture taking place on the shore, within reasonable distance from the shoreline towards the land side. So here there is a question: how far from the shore is onshore? Does it cover the entire inland fishing, aquaculture activities, or is restricted to a limited area from the shoreline? So these are in fact policy questions which are to be answered. Different countries have different boundaries defined for this, and as our previous speaker mentioned, it is very difficult to define boundaries for such concepts. But certainly we have to attempt this and try to find answers for all these questions. Now, for practical purposes, I understand that blue economy include fish harvest, culture, post-harvest, allied activities taking place in the sea within India's legal jurisdiction. All other goods and services, non-fishery, certainly, with origin elsewhere but for use in the seas. That means all the input components that goes into fishing and all other activities, non-fishing activities. And then there is a third component, which is the other goods and services produced and originated in the sea but for use elsewhere, out of the seas. Now, what should be the jurisdiction of all these activities, sectors and subsectors? So I think as far as fish harvest, culture in the sea or water, the geographical coverage or boundary should be within the EZ or such internationally accepted and allocated boundaries, including the ABNJ. And then apart from that, the internal waters, including estuaries, backwaters, creeks and lagoons. That means the entire inland fishing, aquaculture happening away from the from a reasonable distance from the shoreline should not be part of blue accounting or blue economy. This is how I see it, but certainly policy has to be taken on this. Then next comes fish harvest, culture, post-harvest, allied activities happening on the shore. So here the boundary should be within the designated fishing villages. There are about 3,477 fishing villages as per Marine Fisheries Census 2016, which are all close to the shore, and I feel only these fishing villages need to be considered for onshore activities related to fishing and aquaculture, because most of the activities, whether it is processing activities, fish meal production, hatchery related activities, they all happen very close to the shore, mostly very well within the fishing village boundaries. So I think that more than 90% of all the activities come within this, are located within the fishing villages. So that could be very safely taken as the boundary for fish harvest, culture and post-harvest activities happening on shore. As far as other goods and services with origin elsewhere but for use in the seas, there need not be any particular geographic boundary, because these are inputs which can come or can be produced anywhere on the land.
as far as other goods and services produced or originated in the sea or water, but for use elsewhere, here the jurisdiction should be or can be exclusive economic zone or such internationally accepted and allocated boundaries. But then the internationally accepted or allocated boundaries means India has certain allocated areas outside of the EEZ where the country is permitted to undertake economic activities such as those activities part of the deep ocean mission. So you must be aware that the central Indian Ocean Basin has been designated by the UN International Seabed Authority, where India is planning to undertake and elaborate deep sea mining activities. And apart from that, the internal factors including estuaries, backwaters and creeks also should be part of the boundary. And then fish and fish products and other marine products value chains, there need not be any particular boundary. And then coming to the subsectors and sectors, I'm not reading all of them, all the categories, but broadly there should be 4 broad categories within marine fisheries, aquaculture and post-harvest sectors and so on, and fishing allied activities. So the first will be marine fisheries, aquaculture and fish seed production sector, where where all the harvesting of marine fish, crustaceans, mollusks would come, and then harvesting of all these. Mariculture, which is culture of fish in the sea. Mariculture in the internal waters, collection of seeds and fish, crustaceans and mollusks. Gathering of other wild marine organisms such as sponges, pearls, corals, algae and so on. Fish seed production, onshore marine and freshwater aquariums and so on.
Sorry to interrupt you. Can you please wrap up?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. So these are the 2 sectors, and then the third one is fishing, fish culture related activities and fish processing activities. Now, coming to CMFRI's activities as far as data collection is concerned, the CMFRI is undertaking a very elaborate exercise of collecting landing statistics across the country to 6,668 kilometers from the coastline. So this is the history of the marine fisheries data collection done by CMFRI. The information pertains to catch, afford, biological variables, socioeconomic variables, and so on. So it started in fact in 47 onwards itself. Right now we have a very elaborate system of fish catch statistics collection. And then this is the species diversity. We cover around 800 species, and this is the stratification, how is happening, stratification across space as well as time. And then these are the further details on the sampling framework, stratification, and other details. What are the variables covered? And so we also come out every year with the marine fish landing statistics, year-wise, and then another major activity that CMFRI is conducting is the marine fishery census, which is done along with DADF, Department of Agriculture. Right now it is Ministry of Fisheries. And then the census is conducted every 5 years. So far we have conducted for the years 1980, 2005, 2010 and 16, and it covers fishermen population, gender-wise occupation, craft and gear, infrastructure facilities and so on. So this is some data from the census over the years across the census years. And then again some of the employment activities, and then details on the crafts and gear. And then here I have a set of slides. I'm not going into the details, but input cost and revenue, which can be, these estimates can be utilized for input accounting. So here I have this economic estimates for different marine fishing activities, mariculture activities, and this is for green mussel and seaweed, and so on. So you can see the yellow color highlighted numbers are those share of inputs as share of gross revenue. And then I'm finishing my presentation here with, this is the last slide. And apart from the above aspects, I would also bring your focus into some of the less looked at aspects. Like presently there is no survey mechanism on credible estimates for inland capture fish production. So there should be a elaborate mechanism for that, and it may be also thought to bring about separate estimates for inland capture and inland aquaculture production. Right now it is together, and then also coverage of NIC framework. It is not many of the emerging sectors are actually not covered. So if you see those specific activities, you can find many such data gaps. And then also household consumption expenditure survey should be a bit more elaborate with further subdivision on the category of fish. And then also I would appeal that it would be in the interest of the country and the fishery sector in general for introducing a situation assessment survey covering all the fish farmers and marine fishers. So thank you so much. This is a wonderful opportunity. And on behalf of ICRCMFI, I thank you everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Srinivas, for this wonderful exposition on various aspects related to especially the boundaries related to the context of fisheries and aquaculture. These are very contentious issues, and you apprised us excellently on those aspects. I have really a tight job to really function here. We have very little time and two more speakers to go. I request Dr. Ramu and Dr. James to restrict their presentations to 5 minutes each. I now turn to Dr. Ramu, who is currently coordinating the national program on seawater quality monitoring along the coastal waters of India. His research interests are biological oceanography, organic pollution, and marine litter and fisheries. So he specializes in the monitoring anthropogenic contaminants in marine environment. He will be speaking to us on approach towards development of condition accounts for oceans. Over to you, Dr. Ramu. You can speak for 5 minutes if that's possible.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair, for the introduction. And I won't take much of time because already we are running almost an hour late. So as introduced by the Chair, I'll be talking on the approach towards development of the condition accounts for the ocean. And I would like to highlight the importance of the oceans in supporting the economic and as well as other human activities while also being critical to the climate. So as you can see that oceans regulates the climate and also removes about 10 times more CO2 from the atmosphere. So oceans have a lot of important role to play. The previous speakers have talked in detail about ecosystem accounting, which broadly involves 5 components. I'll be speaking mainly on the ecosystem conditions. So that means the ocean conditions for which describe they include the variables which are quantitative metrics that describe the individual characteristics of an ecosystem asset. When we say ecosystem, it can be a forest ecosystem, a desert ecosystem, but here we are concerned about the marine ecosystem. And these ecosystem condition accounts, what is the usefulness of it? They synthesize the information about the changes over time in the state of the ecosystem assets. And this is the broad, this is the flow of how the ecosystem condition works. There are biotic and abiotic characteristics, and then to achieve that, we do the environmental monitoring, and then finally it goes into the policy and the decision making. And this ecosystem condition accounts has the potential to make balanced decisions for both near-term policy and as well as the long-term sustainability. So I'll be speaking on the what are the variables for the marine shelf and the coastal ecosystem. These are the variables which I have taken from the CR document and from the table by Keith et al. 2020. So it's a combination of both abiotic characteristics and the biotic characteristics. When you see in the abiotic characteristics, one includes the physical state, which includes the physical descriptors of the abiotic component. So in case of the marine system, it's on the marine shelf, water clarity, and the microplastic concentrations. When it comes to the chemical state, it includes the descriptors of the chemical composition of the abiotic ecosystem components, mainly the chlorophyll concentration, the oxygen concentration, the pH, and the DO. And in terms of the biotic characteristics, we have three components: the compositional state, structural state, and the functional state. So among the compositional state, it includes characteristics such as the presence or the absence of abundance of a particular species or a taxonomic group. Structural state, it mainly deals on the biomass thing, amount of living or the dead matter, and the functional state includes the processes, the ecosystem processes which are involved in that. So I will be talking about the programs which we at NCCR do and how, which are contributing to develop the ocean condition accounts. We have a program on the seawater quality monitoring and another program on the marine litter and the microplastics, which can contribute to the biotic characteristics. And for the biotic characteristics, we have a program called as the Coastal Resource Assessment and the Management, wherein we work on the coral reefs. But there's another state here which I have not mentioned, is the functional state. So of course, we don't work on the higher trophic levels, but mainly on the lower trophic organisms, mainly on the plankton and the benthos. But on the higher trophic, like the fisheries, we at NCCR don't work on that particular aspect. So this is the program which I mentioned, the seawater quality monitoring program. It is this program is almost being done from the last 3 decades, wherein the water is collected, coastal water quality up to 5 kilometers is monitored at periodic intervals along pan-India basis for the different parameters. So I mentioned here, due to paucity of time, I am not explaining that. And this data we regularly share with the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, and that goes into the InviStats and forms part of the natural capital accounting and valuation of the ecosystem services. And also we do share the information as required by the Niti Aayog and the input for the SDG 14.1. This is another program which on the marine plastics. So we have the research component which we are trying to, it's a newly, we have started this from the last 3 years. So it involves the assessment and the quantification of the marine litter and the microplastics in the biota, in the water sediment and the biota, and we look at the behavior, how these plastics behave in the environment, and also try to study on the ecological impact of these microplastics. Also, we do conduct citizen science awareness through beach cleaning exercises, wherein we create awareness also as we get the data on the quantity of the beach litter on the beaches of India. And as I mentioned, there's a program on the coastal resource assessment and management. There are different coral ecosystems in India: Gulf of Mannar, Lakshadweep, Andaman and Nicobar, and Gulf of Kutch. Right now, we are conducting studies only in the Gulf of Mannar, wherein we do monitoring of the corals, the state of the corals, whether how much percentage is bleached or how much in good condition. Where all they are bleached, we do the restoration activities, trying to restore the degraded coral systems. And this is my final slide. Some of the challenges are there. As we see that there are a lot of activities being done by the different organizations on ocean monitoring. So a lot of data is there. But we need to integrate all the fragmented data. That is one of the challenges is there. And we need to focus on strengthening our understanding of the ocean through improved monitoring, ocean monitoring and the assessment. It's unlike the monitoring on the terrestrial ecosystem. It's very challenging to conduct studies in the oceans. So which involves lot of development of the infrastructure as well as the development of the manpower. And one of the another challenges is there are divergent approaches in different countries. But for developing the ecosystem conditions, we cannot standardize given the what are the different range of ecosystem types and the differences across the countries. But there is always a way forward. It's because now most of the countries began to work on developing the ocean accounts. So a lot of knowledge will evolve over time as more and more countries start implementing this, developing these ocean accounts. So networking and the sharing best practices and overcoming outstanding challenges are one of the way forward to achieve this ocean accounting. Finally, I would like to thank MOSPI for giving me an opportunity to share our thoughts and experiences. Yeah, thank you. I kept my presentation very brief. It was 10 minutes.
Thank you, Dr.
Yeah.
Ramu. That's
Yeah.
very nice of you.
Yeah.
It's been very enriching to really see the kind of data collection process that NCCR is doing, and which actually feeds very well into the ocean accounting process. As a last presenter, I would like to request Dr. James, who is an environment and resource economist with 30 years experience with the World Bank. He is currently working with the World Bank. He specializes in the economics of restoration, focusing on valuation of ecosystem goods and services, as well as conservation of regenerative agriculture. He's been associated with various universities also. And I request Dr. James to speak on challenges for ocean accounting and the global best practices in addressing such challenges. Over to you, Dr. James.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to share some ideas with you on the valuation of marine and coastal ecosystem services, and greetings from South Africa. I just would like to confirm that you can hear me and that you can see my slides.
Yes, we can hear you and also see your slides. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. One of the good things about working in marine and coastal ecosystem services is that one does get the opportunity to go to very beautiful places. And I'm going to share some of those experiences that we have had doing 3 case studies, but I will be very brief. We've done the evaluation of the coastal and marine ecosystem services of Dubai, of Abu Dhabi, and then here in South Africa, one of the more beautiful bays called Algoa Bay. And I'm going to touch briefly on 5 different aspects, starting with the definition and the rationale for doing the valuation of coastal and marine ecosystem services. And there could be a variety of different rationales, but the rationale, the motivation, that which drives you to actually do the evaluation is actually very important, because that also helps to demarcate the study focus, and to help you in terms of what sort of aspects you need to value. Because very often, because of time and resource constraints, one cannot value everything when you have a specific confined time and resources in order to do the evaluation exercise in. Within the context of Dubai and Abu Dhabi, it was quite clear that there is the risk of losing the immediate values, that which Abu Dhabi and Dubai is very famous for in terms of it from a marketing perspective, marketing itself as a tourism destination of choice, that is at risk because of harmful algae blooms affecting the tourism industry. And so we're asking the question, what is the trade-offs because of the various opportunity costs involved in losing the marine and coastal ecosystem services because of harmful algae blooms, and then be able to derive evaluation methods, approaches, in order to be able to answer that specific question, and from there on, then different policy recommendations in order to how one can then avoid the harmful algae blooms and the effects that it may or may not have then on the economy of the United Arab Emirates, Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And then in the context of South Africa, Algoa Bay, it is about the resource use and the demarcation of what areas of the specific bay must be for recreational use, what areas must be for conservation, and what must be for industrial use, and what are the trade-offs in order to within the different zonings of that specific bay. And that also influences it. And in order to be able to determine that rationale requires the engagement of a variety of stakeholders. Having done the rationale, it's very important, as the previous speakers have said and laid out as well, is to think in terms of the mapping of the specific area. And there could be a huge differences in terms of the demarcation because of how the resources are been described in different resources. As the previous speakers have also indicated, that there's not a uniformity about the different definitions, and we can get different definitions around the different resource areas. But within the Algoa Bay area, it is still relatively simple. When thinking of Abu Dhabi, which is much more like an archipelago, with a wide range of marine resources, it becomes very complex. And again, that is so important to clarify the demarcation of the specific resources and to be able to highlight which resources are generating which ecosystem services for which people, and in order to do the valuation exercise. And this mapping component and the demarcation component is both challenging but also extremely necessary to go through because of the effects that it has on the valuation exercise. Going then to the appropriate valuation method. Once we've defined the rationale, we know why we want to do it, we know where we want to do it in terms of the mapping, we can then select the valuation method. Within the context of both Abu Dhabi and Dubai, the question, as I've highlighted, was around the potential loss of the amenity values related to the tourism sector because of how the Abu Dhabi and Dubai was positioning itself as a place of the destination of choice. And so we have utilized contingent valuation methods extensively with a large number of surveys among both beachgoers as well as the people then utilizing the hotel and the hospitality industry. We've utilized both willingness to pay and willingness to accept methods. Usually the willingness to accept method is secondary to the willingness to pay method. Willingness to pay method providing with a more conservative estimate, with a willingness to accept a more liberal value, a much higher value. In this case, the willingness to accept method was considered to be appropriate because of how the municipality, how the authorities are marketing the two destinations, and therefore what is at risk, the opportunity cost of what is at risk, is linked to the marketing of the two different venues. Within the context of Algoa Bay in South Africa, we have used a whole string of different valuation methods that are all linked to different ecosystem services. And the spread across... Sorry, can somebody...
There is a crosstalk, please mute yourself, somebody. Please go ahead, Dr. James.
Thank you very much. And these valuation methods are then distributed across the different ecosystems. And the X's are indicated by what we have been able to value. The question marks are those that we haven't done any valuation around, but where there will be values. And the blanks are the ones that's probably not appropriate to value or not, data will not be available. And then after selecting the valuation methods, going into the actual calculations thereof and the sharing of those results, the results that then feeds into the ocean accounts and other various different policy documents. And within that we see quite a big distribution. Not going to go into the details, but the difference between Abu Dhabi and Dubai, with Dubai, the costs of the algae bloom extremely high, affecting mostly the tourists with a lesser impact on the residents, which then basically, but where it is coming to the offset cost, it's the offset cost, the cost that people would be willing to pay to go to a second beach or to another place, it affects the residents more than what it affects the tourists. And so we see a distributional effect also from the data. And having known both the quantum as well as to be able to differentiate between the who it will affect, help us to identify what would be the most appropriate policies that needs to be followed by doing the valuation and feeding it into the various accounts. With respect to the South African case, the Algoa Bay case, we can differentiate between the different ecosystems, spread it across the different categories of ecosystem services, and then see what the effects of it will be on the individual ecosystem services. From a local residents perspective, it is recreation and tourism. That is the biggest service that's been rendered by a long mile. By about 80% of the services is linked to recreation and tourism, which basically implies that if you have a policy in order to double or even quadruple the food component and provisioning services, it will only increase the food provisioning services by a small amount compared to the total. But if there's any feedback effects in terms of a deteriorating quality, then it might affect the recreation and tourism by a long, quite considerably, because of the interaction between the different ecosystem services. And so this becomes very important feeding into the account from a policy perspective. But this is from a local residents perspective. Doing the same exercise from a global perspective, the situation changes. From a global perspective, supporting services are important, existing existence and request values becomes important, and the recreation is then smaller. Lastly, the results have to be communicated, and this is my last slide. Basically distributed this through a variety of different academic papers, book chapters, websites. There are a large number of different means through which the information can be disseminated to the stakeholders. There's also a video that the Abu Dhabi municipality has made, distributed it among their stakeholders and share the information going forward. And Mr. Chair, thank you very much to you and to the organizers for providing with this opportunity to share some of the work that we have done outside of India. But while I was listening to the colleagues speaking, I could hear and see that the issues and the challenges that the colleagues have in India are identical to what we have had in doing some of the works elsewhere. And it was a privilege participating in the symposium. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's heartening to hear the kind of issues that we are facing in India, quite similar, or at least there is a possibility of learning from other country experiences in this context. Thank you very much. In the past, because of the time constraints, we are not able to really go through the question answers. There were some questions on the chat box, and I'm glad to see that my colleagues, the co-speakers, responded to the questions posed. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the speakers, Dr. Uday Bhaskar, Dr. Shinoz, Dr. Ramu, and Dr. James, for sharing with us their insights on the way in which we can take the process on ocean accounting forward in Indian context. With this, I would conclude the panel discussion. I'll hand it over to Ma'am Savitri for the next steps and the looking forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, the speakers of this, the panelists, and also Dr. Kavi Kumar for moderating the session. Without making much time, because we have already late by an hour, I would, as a follow-up of this particular panel discussion, I just will speak up, briefly tell about what we plan to do, our way forward. First of all, we are planning to organize a brainstorming session, looking at the various activities that have already been being done in silos by various institutes. We thought we'll have a brainstorming session with all the stakeholder ministries, research agencies, and academia. This will help to explore various dimensions of ocean accounting and also help us to identify the areas and targets which are doable. Then outcome of this session will be discussed in a workshop, which we are planning to organize mainly with the coastal states and islands, considering the fact that ocean plays a significant role in their economy. After these two discussions, we will set up a task force to prepare a roadmap for compilation of ocean accounts in India. This task force will have participants from the coastal states. This is what we are thinking of doing and how to take the ocean accounts ahead. With this, I also extend my thanks to the organizers, and we look forward to have more interactions with you all in future. Thank you all the participants, those who are here physically as also attending virtually. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, ma'am. Your words will provide the right impetus towards compilation of ocean-related accounts in India. With this, we have come to an end to the half-day seminar on data for sustainable development, India's environmental accounts and its role in policy and decision-making. We hope to have many more interactions with you all in future. Till then, let's all pledge to create a harmonious relationship with nature. Thank you. I invite you all, those present here with us physically, to kindly join us for the lunch outside this hall. Wish you all a good day. Thank you.